swinging the sword to the side. Jiang Yao, you liar. Liu Ji, why? Jiang Yao had no choice but to turn aside and dodge. Faced with this scene, Jiang Yao didn't know how to explain. There was no time to argue, so the two ran off in different directions. Jiang Yao approached Xing Hui's side, looked at the sword mark on his head, and then questioned Shen Qinghan, who stood beside him like a demon god. You killed Xing Hui. Shen Qinghan ignored it and tried to cross the crack to catch up. It simply began to drift away from the other half of the space in front of it, like floating ice, leaving only extreme darkness in the center where it had been. I'm asking you, did you kill Xing Hui? Faced with Jiang Yao's questioning, Shen Qinghan turned to look at this annoying guy, a murderous intent rising in his heart. However, since Jiang Yao was not the only one who came here, he gave up the idea. I just helped him end his suffering. Jiang Yao angrily said, you know Zhang Kuang shouldn't be killed, yet you still acted this way, and you even risked the lives of your fellow disciples in the sect. After the rift split the world in two, it continued to break apart, the rift heading towards everyone. Shen Qinghan ignored Jiang Yao's questioning and simply retreated. At this point, all the members of the Shaling sect except Liu Ji were dead. The girl, now alone, was somewhat lost and didn't even know where to swing her sword. So he had no choice but to go to Zhang Kuang and lift up the mangled body. The black gun lay across the ground. He tried to pick it up, but the spreading cracks touched it and sliced through the middle. The space shook violently, and everyone lost their footing for a moment. The black spear of the half-immortal soldier trembled for a moment before exploding into two pieces with a bang. Fragments flew everywhere, slashing Liu Ji's face and leaving a horrifying wound. Everyone looked at the crack in the black gun and gasped. Even the semi-divine soldiers couldn't last a single breath within those strange cracks. Without further hesitation, everyone quickly retreated, escaping the area of the collapsing space. A chi cultivator couldn't dodge in time, and his arm was instantly severed. He let out a muffled groan and dared not linger, unable to even retrieve his arm. Holding Giant 12, Mu Yunggui and Jiang Ruochen ran back the way they came. The space behind them shattered into countless small pieces, cutting everything apart. Jiang Ruochen's voice came from behind the mask. Master, what's wrong? Mu Yunggui replied. Shen Qinghan's breakthrough caused the order to collapse, and the secret realm began to crumble. Let's head towards the exit first. The secret realm opened, and in less than a day, before all the opportunities and treasures inside had been looted, it began to collapse. The spatial rift started from the one that appeared in the center of the battlefield, and then appeared out of thin air in various places. The space was divided into small sections, some the size of rooms, and was still collapsing. As Su Yue, holding her child in her arms, was about to reach the entrance, a crack suddenly appeared in the space around her waist. Just as the crack was about to fully appear and cleave Su Feng and the baby in half, the already collapsing heavenly Tao descended once more, and the last vestiges of its consciousness surged forth, annihilate all spaces within the secret realm. In the end, when the heavenly Tao disappeared, and even that last trace of the great Tao could not be maintained, space shattered completely. In an instant, everything went black, and the cultivators in the secret realm began to fall into nothingness. Seeing this, Mu Yunggui quickly pulled Jiang Ruochen back, looking earnestly into the girl's eyes and saying, Ruochen, everything will disappear soon, but I'm here, I'll always be here. Don't think nonsense. Jiang Ruochen looked at their intertwined hands, raised her head as if to ask something, but before she could speak, she suddenly lost her strength, and the whole world turned black. Hearing is taken away. All sound has disappeared, sight is taken away. All that is left is extreme blackness, and one cannot even feel one's own body. Time and space have collapsed, only the mind can still think. With nothing in sight, many cultivators began to have wild, chaotic thoughts. 5 years, 10 years, and the time within the world they constructed in their minds stretched infinitely, until their thoughts were on the verge of collapse. There was nothing there. Some cultivators emptied their minds, their divine senses dissolving into nothingness, and they had already lost the ability to think. Mu Yunggui had encountered similar situations before. Here, 100 or 1,000 years might have passed, or it might only be the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, but in the outside world it would only be a second. Although Mu Yunggui no longer had control over his body, he dared not move rashly, because he still had an important person in his hands after returning to the outside world. Aside from thinking, I can't perceive anything. However, one of them was special. A certain girl actually still possessed the perception of one hand. The girl could still feel the reassuring warmth emanating from her palms. Chapter 82, Glazed Lamp. Even though many sect leaders tried their best to maintain the entrance to the secret realm, the Great Formation still shattered instantly. However, the mirrored gate at the original entrance reopened, teleporting everyone out. Looking back, the entrance to the secret realm had vanished without a trace. However, as the cultivators returned to the mortal world from the void, various situations arose. Many showed great terror on their faces or became stunned, and some even vomited uncontrollably. However, only a minority of people experienced a mental breakdown, most quickly regained their senses, but dared not recall the fear they had just experienced. The cultivator who died first was brought out by a girl from the same sect. The sect leader was heartbroken, but before he could even sigh, everyone's eyes were drawn to a certain place. The girl in black and red was holding a headless corpse in her hands. The cut from the sword was extremely clean. Liu Ji brought out Zhang Kuang's corpse. "Off, madman!" The piercing scream seemed to tear the sky apart. Zhang Moshen's eyes widened, bloodshot, and his eye sockets almost burst open. He stared intently at the dismembered body, feeling as if struck by lightning, his body trembling uncontrollably. With a flash, he appeared beside Liu Ji in an instant. He stretched out his trembling hands and slowly lifted the head that was still staring blankly into the night, the sharp sword intent still lingering. Meanwhile, Shen Qinghan was also in a sorry state. Her once smooth and shiny long hair was now somewhat disheveled, with a few strands falling down and obscuring half of her face. However, before she could even catch her breath, an overwhelming, monstrous force swept towards her like a storm. Two streams of bloody tears flowed from Zhang Moshen's eyes, streaking his face, which was contorted with extreme grief and anger. He roared, "Give me back my son's life." Faced with this terrifying attack capable of destroying everything, Shen Qinghan's face instantly turned deathly pale. Just at the critical moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. It was Shen Lingxiao. The intense aftershocks were no less powerful than the aftershocks of the opening of the secret realm, and perhaps even stronger. All the nascent soul stage sect leaders immediately stood in front of their own cultivators, their eyes filled with solemnity. The battle between cultivators at the void refinement stage is about to begin. Shen Lingxiao frowned and questioned, "Qinghan, what happened?" Shen Qinghan was in a terrible state at the moment, but she lowered her eyes and told Shen Lingxiao about everything that had happened. The Tao fruit that was released, the immortal sword, the divine heart sutra, the 12 swords. Shen Lingxiao was shocked when he heard this. But he couldn't stop, for another spear thrust came from a cultivator in the void refinement stage. Shen Lingxiao looked at his berserk opponent and roared, "Zhang Moshen, there's something fishy about this. Someone else killed your son." At this moment, Zhang Moshen's face was covered in blood and tears as he roared, "Someone else? What a someone else? Who else could that sword intent come from but your daughter's hand? Who in that secret realm can kill my son? I must take revenge, a life for a life." The cultivators at the void refinement stage unleashed their full power, and the valley, already weakened by the initial impact, crumbled instantly, as if made of paper. Boulders tumbled down and dust filled the sky. The immense impact caused the ground to tremble violently, as if the entire world was about to collapse. The other nascent soul stage sect leaders around them looked grim, trying their best to withstand the residual power from the battle between the two. Looking at Zhang Moshen again, he was now bloodthirsty. As for the words "life or death is irrelevant," spoken before entering the secret realm, they had long lost their effect in front of Zhang Moshen, who had lost his eldest son. Although the sect leader whose disciple was killed by Zhang Kuang was furious, he didn't even have the right to intervene in the battle. Seeing this, many sects gave the disheveled Shen Qinghan, the holy maiden of the Tai Xuan sword sect who had already entered the golden core stage, a meaningful look. What was originally a fairly uneventful treasure hunt in a secret realm has turned into this terrible situation. Shen Qinghan knelt behind Shen Lingxiao, and under everyone's gaze, the girl slowly swallowed a pill to restore her spiritual energy. Her long black hair now covered her left eye, and a scar could be vaguely seen on her face, making her look quite gruesome. Although only half a day had passed, quite a few sects had actually benefited, though most of it didn't even amount to the spirit stones they had spent. Many sects, seeing this, were relieved that their disciples were not injured, and that things hadn't turned out any worse. He sneered inwardly as he looked at the other sects, whose future had already been severely damaged. The sects remained silent during the battle between cultivators in the void refinement stage. They merely glanced at Qiu Shan before taking their leave. Parting on bad terms is the best possible outcome. At this moment, Zhang Moshen had lost his mind, and was about to fight Shen Lingxiao to the death. Tusk. Shen Lingxiao's strength was actually a whole minor realm higher than Zhang Mashan's. But at this moment, because he was focused on protecting Shen Qinghan, he was somewhat restrained, which gradually turned the situation against him. Taixuan. With a sound, a black and white longsword slowly appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. With that, he suddenly swung his wide sleeves, and his hands moved swiftly between complex and mysterious sword techniques. In an instant, the immortal sword arrived above Zhang Mashan, its tip pointing downwards. Suddenly, it emitted a point of light as black as ink. Immediately afterwards, this point of ink spread out at an astonishing speed, eventually transforming into a towering sword aura as massive as a mountain. The sword energy was like a torrent surging down from the heavens, carrying an unstoppable, domineering, and unreasonable momentum, crashing straight down at Zhang Mashan below. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Shen Lingxiao reached out and grabbed Shen Qinghan beside him, quickly retreating a distance. Taking advantage of the brief moment, Shen Lingxiao flipped his wrist, and a dark green glass lamp appeared in his hand. The glass lamp had 4 layers and 12 black wicks, 10 of which were burning with eerie green flames, while one of the flames on the 3rd layer had already gone out. As the glass lamp appeared, an ominous, ghostly aura instantly spread out, like an invisible fog, sending chills down one's spine. That sinister atmosphere seemed to emanate from the deepest hell, making one's hair stand on end. Akiyama, who could only watch from the sidelines, was horrified when he saw this. The main problem was the aura of that magical treasure. It was the kind used by ghost cultivators. Moreover, this kind of magical treasure, filled with evil energy, actually appeared in the hands of the sect master of the Taixuan sword sect, the leader of the righteous path in the eastern continent. Shen Lingxiao gazed at the faint, almost extinguished, eerie green flame within the glass lamp and silently recited an incantation. Then the flame flickered and went out, leaving a wisp of smoke rising. Having done all this in an instant, Shen Lingxiao conjured a clone and used a strange technique to pinch the dissipating green smoke between his 2 fingers. Trying to call for reinforcements, come on, die. Zhang Mashan broke free from the sword energy surging from Taixuan and attacked Shen Lingxiao's clone. But Shen Lingxiao stopped him. Holding Taixuan in his hand, Shen Lingxiao snorted coldly. Since you want to die, then come on. The 2 continued fighting. On the other side, the 3 people who lost their sense of gravity fell from a height of several meters. After regaining his senses, Mu Yongui quickly turned around and hugged the girl to his chest. Without any cushioning, he fell straight to the ground, feeling a pain in his chest. However, due to his robust physique, he was not in much trouble. Mu Yongui propped himself up, holding the girl's arms in his arms, and hurriedly asked, "Ryuachin, how are you? Is your head all right?" Mu Yongui was worried that the girl might have a bad idea of what was going on in that lawless place, so he asked her with concern. "Ryuachin is all right. Everything just went black for a moment and she fell right out." Jiang Ryuachin was wearing a mask and had not yet taken it off, so Mu Yongui could not see the girl's condition. Actually, the girl's face, whose scars had faded, was blushing slightly beneath the mask. Not wanting his master to see him in such an embarrassing state, he changed the subject. "By the way, where's this guy?" Jiang Ryuachin pointed to Giant 12 lying to the side. Seeing that Jiang Ryuachin was all right, Mu Yongui turned his attention to Jian Shear and examined him carefully. Fortunately, thanks to the effects of the heavenly essence elixir, his life had been saved, though he had not yet woken up. Mu Yongui sensed the lingering demonic energy here. It seems Su Yue has already left with the baby, but she hasn't forgotten Hu Fan. "Let's leave here first." Jiang Ryuachin nodded, then picked up Giant 12. Mu Yongui felt a little awkward as she looked at the somewhat petite figure picking up another petite figure, so she tried asking and answering questions. "Or should I do it?" "Need not." Mu Yongui flew away on his sword with the girl for a short distance before they heard the sound of thunder in the distance. Shen Lingxiao is fighting with the sect leader of the Shaling sect. It seems he's too busy to pay attention to us. Before he could finish speaking, a drop of black blood suddenly condensed on the forehead of Giant 12 in Mu Yonggui's arms. Then he let out a painful howl and began to struggle wildly, as if he was in great pain. Mu Yongui almost lost his grip and fell to the ground. After regaining his balance, he saw the unusual spot on Jian Shear's forehead and immediately felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar, his whole body drenched in cold sweat. Without any hesitation, the sound of shattering porcelain echoed from Mu Yonggui's sleeve. He then stopped on his sword, unleashing a slash of sword energy that extinguished the eerie green flames. At this moment, Mu Yungui felt the breath of death for the first time since his rebirth. After turning around and stopping, he unleashed all the talismans on his body, and his sword energy frantically flowed into his obsession. He tossed a delicate little booklet from the ring. It was one that Jiang Ruochen had never seen before. Mu Yungui took a deep breath, handed the porcelain bottle and booklet to the girl, and trying his best to appear calm, said in a deep voice, "Ruochen, you go first." Jiang Ruochen sensed something was wrong. It was the first time she had seen Mu Yungui so flustered, so she hurriedly asked, "Master, what's wrong?" Mu Yungui gritted his teeth and said, "Don't ask, just go first. Go to Qin Valley in Zhangzhou, hurry." The girl panicked and walked towards Mu Yungui. "Have we been discovered by the enemy? No, I must follow Master." Mu Yungui glared at the girl behind him and said sternly, "Jiang Ruochen, listen to me." Jiang Ruochen was stunned for a moment. This was the first time she had heard her master call her by her full name. The moment Shen Lingxiao unleashed his clone, Ning Xianqi, who was still at the entrance of the secret realm and hadn't recovered from his shock, was suddenly startled. Before Xai could even react, Ning Xian pulled out a dagger and plunged it into his own heart without hesitation. Chapter 83 5 Moves. Few people would gamble with their lives. Mu Yungui wouldn't have done this if there hadn't been absolutely no other choice. When Mu Yungui saw the wisp of black energy appear on Giant 12's forehead, he knew things had taken an unexpected turn. Hearing her master speak to her in such a serious tone for the first time, the girl wasn't saddened, but instead stubbornly replied, "Master Ruochen, don't go." Mu Yungui glared at his little apprentice and said angrily, "You'll die if you don't leave. If you get captured, what am I protecting?" Mu Yungui stopped explaining, conjured a clone, picked up the girl, and flew away. The obsession in his hand hummed and emitted a dazzling light. Mu Yungui pondered this critically important time. 5 moves, just survive 5 moves. As expected, a middle-aged man flew in from afar, making no attempt to conceal his cultivation level and killing intent. Looking at one of the people he once respected most in his past life, Mu Yungui felt even colder. Perhaps because Shen Qinghan was still in such a sorry state after breaking through to the Golden Core stage in the secret realm, Shen Lingxiao also took precautions and had this clone take away a nascent soul stage cultivation. Shen Lingxiao flew over Mu Yungui and snorted coldly. "Where did this rat come from? It's got quite the nerve." Shen Lingxiao did not speak to Mu Yungui, but instead waved his sleeve, unleashing a powerful aura towards Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui gritted his teeth and drew his sword. He couldn't even dodge the opponent's magic, so he stepped forward to block in front of Giant 12. All the talismans were connected end to end, turning into a long dragon that crashed towards Shen Lingxiao. The talismans activated with a series of booming sounds, exploding against the oncoming sword energy wall. But the city wall still stood, magnified in Mu Yungui's eyes, and crashed down on him. The difference in their cultivation levels was simply too great, and even Mu Yungui couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. He still drew his sword with all his might. The most powerful sword strike is unleashed here. Shen Lingxiao looked at Mu Yungui and praised him for no reason. "You still didn't give up resisting when you saw me. You even dared to draw your sword. You are quite the sword cultivator." Although everyone sincerely praised Mu Yungui's strength, the person who cast the powerful spell showed no intention of withdrawing it. Suddenly, a dazzling light flashed at the tip of the obsession sword in Mu Yungui's hand, followed by an extremely sharp sword aura whistling out. Compared to the grand magic unleashed by the opponent, the sword energy seemed insignificant and even somewhat comical. From a distance, the whole scene looked like a lone sword desperately trying to hold back the towering, endless city wall that was surging like a tidal wave. Just then, a loud boom was heard, and Mu Yungui was instantly slammed backward by an irresistible pressure. Finally, with another earth-shattering roar, Mu Yungui crashed heavily into a large mountain not far behind him. In an instant, the mountains shook and the earth trembled. Sand and stones flew everywhere. The once towering peaks collapsed and fractured violently at this moment, and countless huge rocks rolled down, raising clouds of dust that blotted out the sun. "Holding a celestial sword? That's really suspicious." Shen Lingxiao looked at the ruins and then laughed. "Fortunately, I was careful after Jian Qi disappeared, and later used trickery to light the soul lamps of the other dark swords. Otherwise, I would not have known that someone would dare to plot against me." Shen Lingxiao sensed that the immortal sword was a creation of nature, and he wondered where the other party had obtained it. With a thought, the obsession was lifted from the ruins by an invisible force and slowly came to Shen Lingxiao. The obsession trembled wildly, wanting to escape control. It is indeed no ordinary item. It is a pleasant surprise. He reached out to pick up the obsession, but at that moment the glass sword severed the invisible force and instead drew a sword light, flying back to the ruins. At this moment, Mu Yungui, covered in blood, crawled out, his cloud-black mask and sword box behind him crushed by the oppressive force. The boy, his face covered in blood, was only wearing a tattered black garment. Although I had fewer things on me, my body felt as if it were weighed down by a mountain, and I could hardly breathe. Shen Lingxiao landed and looked at the small red mark on his index finger, but there was no actual wound. Shen Lingxiao ignored it and instead bombarded him with a series of questions. Who are you? Why did you enter the secret realm to assassinate King Hin and take Giant 12 away? Where did the heavenly essence elixir and that demonic heart go? Mu Yungui silently recited in his heart, one move. He then coughed up a mouthful of blood, chuckled to himself, and realized that he had almost lost his fighting ability after just one encounter with Shen Lingxiao. Mu Yungui looked up and murmured, "If I tell you, will you let me go?" Shen Lingxiao shook his head and said, "You'll die anyway if you tell me. I just want to hear if what you said before you died and after the soul search are consistent. Then I'd better not say anything." Mu Yungui, clinging to his obsession, tremblingly thrust out another sword. A flash of sword light streaked across the sky, blinding everyone for a moment. Shen Lingxiao remained silent, gave a cold snort, and simply pressed his palm down slightly. As Mu Yungui streaked away amidst the sword light, his body seemed to be subjected to immense pressure, and his body, which had already risen into the air, was forcefully slammed down. Shen Lingxiao glanced at Mu Yungui and said mockingly, "Do you think you can escape from me?" At this moment, Mu Yungui's limbs were shattered, and his senses were gradually disappearing. He could only rely on instinct to grip the sword. Shen Lingxiao lifted the already exhausted Mu Yungui to his side, and slowly raised her by the neck with one hand. "Still not going to tell?" Mu Yungui's weak voice rang out, struggling, "Cough, cough, I'll talk. I've already been honest." Then he silently recited in his mind, 2 moves. Mu Yungui was casually thrown down by Shen Lingxiao, then wiped his blood-covered face and said, "This matter. How should I put it? In fact, generally speaking, it should be said like this. That's the situation right now. You don't need to guess the details. Those who know, those who don't." Before Mu Yungui could finish speaking, a murderous glint flashed in Shen Lingxiao's eyes, and he glared at him, saying, "Are you stalling for time?" Mu Yungui smiled. Chapter 84, It's Almost Time. A series of deafening, earth-shattering roars echoed from afar, as if they were about to tear the entire world apart. It seems that a life or death battle between 2 cultivators at the void refinement stage has not occurred in the eastern continent for many years. The commotion there was so great that this place didn't seem so scary. The battle between Shen Lingxiao's clone and Mu Yungui was nothing more than a one-sided massacre. Shen Lingxiao actually wanted to kill a Foundation establishment cultivator, and he could have killed him instantly from the very beginning. According to his daughter, the boy in front of him seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, which was too strange. He had taken away a holy eye and was accompanied by that demonic heart. All his actions were to hinder him. Shen Lingxiao reviewed his memories and confirmed that he had never seen this person before. Shen Lingxiao shook his head, his 5 fingers loosely clenched, and patted towards Mu Yungui's head. "Soul search is still the fastest." Shen Lingxiao glanced at the other person and noticed that the young man, who seemed to have been holding a talisman in his hand, was now moving. The last flash talisman lit up, and Mu Yungui's figure disappeared again, reappearing 1,000 meters away. Shen Lingxiao snorted coldly and took a step forward. Just a moment later, Shen Lingxiao reappeared beside Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui turned around and thrust out a sword with all his might. Shen Lingxiao extended a finger and lightly touched the tip of the obsession sword, and the sword energy shattered completely. "Since you want to die, then I'll grant your wish." Shen Lingxiao exerted a little force, forcibly pulling the sword that had been extended forward back. Mu Yungui, wielding the sword, was suddenly swept away by his obsession and slammed into the mountainside. At this moment, obsession was like a sword being drawn in reverse, piercing Mu Yungui's abdomen with the hilt, revealing a wound the size of a fist. Or rather, it could no longer be called a wound, but rather a gash. At this moment, the boy was pinned to the mountainside, his dantian shattered, and all the spiritual energy and life force within his body began to dissipate. Mu Yungui simply lowered his head and silently recited 3 moves. Shen Lingxiao flew to Mu Yungui's side, staring at Mu Yungui's increasingly unfocused eyes, and mocked. You think I won't dare kill you just because you carry my secrets? I have dozens of ways to extract your memories. Now, how does death feel? Mu Yungui struggled to lift his eyes, but his vision was already filled with blood, and he could no longer see the person in front of him. Not good. Taking advantage of Mu Yungui's fading consciousness, Shen Lingxiao seized the opportunity to ask, "Where are the demon heart and the heavenly essence liquid?" Listening to what Shen Lingxiao said, Mu Yungui forced himself to cheer up and confidently said, "A demonic heart? There will be no more demonic heart, only a divine heart. And that divine heart is 1,000 times, 10,000 times stronger than your daughter's. As for the heavenly essence liquid, spit." Before Mu Yungui could finish speaking, he spat a mouthful of blood onto Shen Lingxiao's face. However, Shen Lingxiao was already prepared, and an invisible wall blocked their way. The blood mixed with porcelain shards caught Shen Lingxiao's attention. Sensing the boundless vitality within the other's body, he became enraged. "I'm going to kill you." Seeing this, Mu Yungui chewed on the shards of broken porcelain in his mouth, ignoring the horrific wounds inside, and calmly said, "You've always wanted to kill me. Come on, slap me to death." In that instant, dozens of drops of heavenly essence liquid surged into Mu Yungui's body like a flood bursting its banks. The spiritual energy contained in these heavenly essence liquids is extremely vast, and its power is so great that even those at the golden core or nascent soul stages would find it difficult to withstand. Once such terrifying spiritual energy erupts, it is enough to instantly destroy any golden core cultivator, and even a nascent soul cultivator would likely be reduced to ashes in an instant. However, before bursting his body, the spiritual liquid acted as a healing pill that could not be classified by rank, merging into Mu Yungui's body. At this moment, the gaping wound in his abdomen began to grow flesh and blood wildly. Shen Lingxiao stopped after a moment, suppressing his murderous intent, and roared, "You are going to die anyway. This is just a different way of dying. Once your wounds heal, the power of the spiritual liquid will burst your body." Shen Lingxiao was about to search Mu Yungui's soul to find the demonic heart that had escaped from her memories, but his hand stopped again. Shen Lingxiao's anger turned into laughter. "Ha ha ha." In the distance, a golden goddess image, tens of meters tall, swept towards them. The image held a long sword and slashed at Shen Lingxiao. Shen Lingxiao's anger at the boy's brief setback vanished instantly, replaced by a smile. "How does it feel to have all your previous efforts wasted?" Feeling that incredibly familiar power, Mu Yungui cursed. "Jiang Ryuachin, you idiot." After dodging the attack in a flash, Shen Lingxiao stopped and remarked with emotion, "Their bond is truly deep. At least it saves me the trouble of searching." Jiang Ryuachin's eyes were red and swollen. The girl bit her fangs, trying to save her master. "Ryuachin is an idiot. Without her master, Ryuachin wouldn't leave." Shen Lingxiao summoned a silk thread and wrapped it around Jiang Ryuachin's ankle. The girl swung her sword, but even after Liao Chu touched the thread and a gash appeared, the thread remained unmoved. Just as the silk thread was about to wrap around the girl's ankle, a pink talisman automatically flew out from the girl's sleeve and blocked the silk thread in front of her. High-level talisman. Mu Yungui could no longer see clearly, but he could still discern the aura emanating from the Taoist he had encountered at the ferry crossing. Instantly recalling the beautiful talisman Jiang Ryuachin had chosen earlier, Mu Yungui silently thanked the unknown Taoist priest in his heart. The large gash on his lower abdomen, about the size of a bowl, had already begun to heal in just a short time, enveloped by his obsession. Mu Yungui gritted his teeth and pulled out the obsession, causing blood to spurt out again. The more intense pain overwhelmed the original pain, leaving Mu Yungui with nothing to fear anymore. As Mu Yungui pulled away his obsession, his body plummeted and crashed heavily to the bottom of the mountain. After the talisman blocked Shen Lingxiao's attack, Mu Yungui breathed a sigh of relief. Mu Yungui looked up, gazing at the sky with his bloodshot eyes, and murmured, "It's almost time." Chapter 85, The Curtain Falls. Jiang Ryuachin felt a sudden tightness in her heart, and a strong sense of fear instantly surged into her mind. The purest heart inside my body skipped a beat as it pounded violently. Immediately afterwards, a wisp of black energy appeared, instantly surging towards her heart like a tidal wave, tightly enveloping it. Jiang Ryuachin slightly raised her right index finger, gathering all her spiritual power. In an instant, a drop of bright red blood slowly seeped from his fingertip, like a dazzling ruby. A spell powerful enough to kill a golden core cultivator exuded a destructive aura, and was instinctively unleashed by the girl. However, the gap between his own realm and the other party's realm was as vast as an insurmountable chasm. Shen Lingxiu raised his hand to block, muttering to himself. They switched things up in the blink of an eye, saving me the trouble of disciplining them. What a series of unexpected delights. Jiang Ruochen turned back, almost disrupting Mu Yonggui's plans and causing him to lose his composure, because the soul-searching technique was actually ineffective for Mu Yongui. On the contrary, if Shen Lingxiu were to use soul-searching, he might be able to delay the situation for a considerable period of time. Fortunately, there was enough time. Mu Yongui, who had fallen to the bottom of the mountain, blinked hard to confirm that the thing in his sight really existed. Only after sensing its presence did Mu Yongui feel at ease. He muttered to himself, "It really is true that villains die from talking too much." Although the sarcastic remarks were so weak as to be almost imperceptible, Shen Lingxiu still caught them. Mu Yongui continued to sneer. "Shen Lingxiu, I won this time. A foundation establishment cultivator defeated a nascent soul cultivator like you might as well die." Shen Lingxiu had no idea what the dying boy was babbling about. A sigh was heard in front of him. Shen Lingxiu noticed someone else beside him and turned around abruptly, shouting, "Who's there?" Then, without warning, the nascent soul stage clone exploded. Upon seeing the newcomer, Mu Yonggui's body finally gave way, and he fainted. At this moment, the battlefield fell silent. A rumbling sound echoed in the distance, suggesting that the battle between cultivators at the void refinement stage wouldn't end so quickly. A giant cyan flute, tens of meters long, appeared above Mu Yongui a few seconds ago. At this moment, Ning Xianqi, who was standing on the giant flute, had already plunged the dagger in his hand deep into his chest. With just a little force, he might die. Kazhai leaped down from the giant flute and instantly moved to Jiang Ruochen's side. He carefully stretched out his arms and gently embraced the unconscious girl. Looking at the person in his arms, Kazhai removed the mask. He saw that Jiang Ruochen's eyes were tightly closed, her face was as pale as paper, and 2 lines of bloody tears were slowly flowing down her delicate cheeks. Even though she was unconscious at this moment, her tightly furrowed brows and distorted face were still clearly visible, indicating that she was enduring great pain. Kazhai looked at Ning Xianqi and asked, "How could this happen? What exactly happened?" Ning Xianqi ignored Kazhai and turned to a middle-aged cultivator beside him, roaring, "Save him! Don't think you can stop me from committing suicide. If I want to, I have 100 ways to die." The middle-aged cultivator had a head of gray hair and wore a blue robe. He stared at the dying boy on the ground, looking somewhat hesitant. The middle-aged cultivator slowly spoke, "Young master, as you know, the protectors only intervene when the target's life is in mortal danger. I did not appear when you and this young man killed Zhang Tu." Ning Xianqi threatened, "Do you think I'm bluffing?" After saying that, he plunged the dagger in a little further. The middle-aged cultivator, as if facing a formidable enemy, paled and hurriedly replied, all right, young master, please don't act rashly. But I can't save him anymore. His chi-si is shattered, and being unable to cultivate is a minor matter for him. Once all his injuries have been repaired by the heavenly spirit elixir, the spiritual energy will overwhelm him and cause him to explode. I don't care about this or that, I want him alive, Ning Xianqi scolded the cultivator. If he doesn't live, I won't live either. The middle-aged Taoist looked at his sect's future successor, who had always been a reserved and refined young sect leader, but had changed into this after only spending a few days with the boy. Could this young man be some kind of fox demon who has stolen the young sect master's soul? The cultivator couldn't understand what the boy had said to Ning Xianqi, so he just sighed helplessly and lifted the man, who was almost certainly going to die, onto the bamboo flute at his feet. At this point, the cultivator no longer cared about the consequences or what would happen to others. He simply let things be as they were. He reminded Kazhai, "There is one more person." After taking the bamboo flute with Jiang Ruochen, who had just fainted from exhaustion, Kazhai spread out his divine sense and came to a collapsed valley. After the boulder was removed, a long sword stood there, its sword energy creating a small space, and there stood a girl covered in blood. What on earth happened? A nascent soul cultivator attacking 3 foundation establishment cultivators. Kazhai drew his broken sword and picked up Jian Shir, who was also severely injured. Without any hesitation, Ning Xianqi roared at the middle-aged cultivator, "Return to the sect." With a flick of his sleeve, Ning Xianqi's middle-aged protector gathered all the blood, scent, and even fragments of tattered clothing from the battlefield. In just a moment, nothing but the shattered battlefield could detect what had happened here. At the entrance to the secret realm, Shen Lingxiao suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head, followed by a fit of rage. His own nascent soul clone had been destroyed by an unknown person, and he couldn't stop the other party at the moment. He could only vent his anger on the madman in front of him. Zhang Moshan, you idiot. Do you really think your good-for-nothing son could force my daughter to break through her cultivation level in the secret realm? A mere void refinement cultivator can be so easily fooled. Shen Lingxiao didn't linger and went to meet him with Tai Xuan in his hand, but at this moment his killing intent was fully revealed. After only a few rounds, both of them were injured. Shen Lingxiao's face darkened. I'm not going to waste any more time with a madman like you. At this moment, Zhang Moshan, who was seriously injured, gradually regained his rationality as his injuries progressed. The hatred hadn't disappeared, but they had to admit they couldn't kill each other here. The two were evenly matched. Zhang Moshan looked at Zhang Quang's corpse, his eyes filled with grief, yet unable to avenge him. My Shaling sect and your Taixuan sword sect are officially at war. Having said that, he carried Zhang Quang's corpse away. The fighting stopped, but Akiyama remained standing to the side, not daring to speak. Shen Lingxiao remained silent. After Zhang Moshan left, he did not explain anything, ignored everyone present, and took Shen Qinghan with him in a flash to the place where his clone had fallen. The ruins only indicated that a battle had taken place here. As Shen Lingxiao spread his divine sense, he couldn't find even a single clue to follow. Shen Qinghan hadn't spoken since leaving the secret realm, but now he opened his somewhat pale mouth and asked, Father, you didn't kill that person either. That person is at the 5th realm, no, maybe a 6th realm cultivator behind me. That cultivator destroyed my clone. Although we couldn't find out why they attacked us, I shattered their qi and, in order to survive, they devoured all the heavenly essence liquid. That immense spiritual energy will burst his body. He's doomed. It's just a pity that your demonic heart has been released again. Shen Qinghan persisted, asking further, Can we still track down Sword 12 using that lamp? Shen Lingxiao shook his head, looking at the wound on his hand inflicted by Zhang Moshan. He never expected to be outmaneuvered by a Foundation establishment cultivator on this trip, suffering a great loss. The lights are off, we can't track that guy anymore. I have memorized the boy's appearance. After returning to the sect, I will instruct Dark Sword to draw a portrait and then ask the assassins from the underworld for help. The enforcement hall will likely cause trouble when we get back. Go into seclusion and recuperate properly. I will go into seclusion for a few years to find an opportunity to break through my cultivation level. Once I reach the integration stage, the Tai Xuan sword sect will basically be ours. As Shen Lingxiao spoke, his eyes were filled with ambition. Then he changed the subject. As for your 7th grade golden core, it's not too bad. Cultivate diligently and perhaps other opportunities will arise. Shen Lingxiao spoke tactfully, but there was still a hint of disappointment in his words. Shen Qinghan listened to the words of comfort, but felt no relief whatsoever. Instead, the indelible shame remained deeply etched in his heart. Her hands were clenched tightly, blood seeping from her fingertips as she struggled to suppress her anger. Understood, father. A wisp of black energy suddenly appeared in the girl's heart, without even Shen Lingxiao noticing. Chapter 86, What Happened Afterwards, Part 1. It hasn't snowed in Dongzhou for decades, but it's been snowing for the past 2 years. A year and a half ago, after the Meteor Dragon mountain range lost its head, the people around it were in a state of panic for several months. Only after the celestial light stopped appearing so frequently did people gradually forget their fear of that world-destroying power. After that, there were far fewer monsters coming down from the mountains, and this year it seems there haven't been any more reports of people being dragged away by monsters. The residents of the Longyuan dynasty felt a growing sense of gratitude towards the cultivators on the mountain, a shift from their initial fear of them. At this moment, the forbidden area that people originally had to detour around no longer seemed as terrifying to them as before. In the tea village, the eaves and courtyards were covered with a thick layer of snow after months of continuous light snowfall. The village children stood in front of the street, holding handfuls of snow they had never seen before, their hands red from the cold, yet they were still having a great time. Smoke curls from the chimney of a small courtyard at the edge of the village. Father, you're back. A girl's voice rang out, and the courtyard gate was pushed open. Chen Qinger was wrapped in a thick robe, with a scarf around her pretty face, and the tip of her nose was slightly red from the cold. Upon closer inspection, the girl had indeed grown much taller than before, and her originally slightly dark wheat-colored skin had now become as white as jade. as delicate and smooth as mutton fat. That once slightly immature face has gradually lost its childishness and gained a touch of maturity with the passage of time. The girl gently shook off the snow from her thick, bulky robe, then deftly changed into a lighter, more flexible garment. Her long, jet-black hair, cascading down to her waist like a waterfall, was casually tied back with a ribbon. In the middle of the room, a stove with charcoal burning underneath, which had been burning almost all winter, was covered by a wooden table. The girl draped a cotton blanket over herself, wishing she could shrink completely inside it. Inside the courtyard, Chenmo carried a pot of boiling oil and placed it inside the house. Chenmo rubbed his hands together, took out the bowls and chopsticks, and like Chen Qinger, huddled around the stove to warm his hands. Chenmo noticed Chen Qinger's blank stare and asked curiously, "What's wrong? Qinger doesn't seem very happy." The girl lay sprawled on the table, unwilling to move, her gaze fixed on the unpainted statue. "Either don't come at all or come for so long. After 2 years, I'm getting a little tired of it." Although it wasn't explicitly stated, the main reason was that the girl felt it was too cold. Chenmo also looked at the statue. The girl already looked remarkably similar to it. Chenmo looked at his daughter, who seemed to have grown up in the blink of an eye, and was momentarily dazed. "Your eyes are just like your mother's." Chen Qinger turned her head and leaned on Chen Mo's shoulder, murmuring, "You never wanted to talk to me about her before, so why are you talking about it today?" Chen Mo looked at the endless snow outside, his thoughts seemingly returning to many years ago. That was before Chen Qinger existed. Chen Mo did not answer Chen Qinger's question, but instead asked, "By the way, has the blueprint I gave to Qinger a year ago been completed?" Hearing her father's words, Chen Qinger thought of that thing and inexplicably complained, "I don't know where you got this thing, Dad. How could a normal person make it?" Hearing what Chen Qinger said, Chen Mo, who had initially had some ideas, seemed to become conflicted again. Qinger didn't manage to make it. It's like picking something up and then putting it down. Just then, Chen Qinger chuckled and changed the subject. "How could that be? Chen Qinger isn't an ordinary person, Tilda. Remember, Brother Mew said I was quite extraordinary, Tilda." Chen Qinger tilted her head back, a smug look on her face. After saying that, he got up and ran to the room to carefully take out an object. "They actually managed to make such a bizarre thing for me." The item Chen Qinger took out was a lifelike crane the size of a fist. However, upon closer inspection, one will discover that this crane is actually a piece of open-work craftsmanship. Through those intricate holes, one can see the hidden world inside the crane's body. Inside, there are hundreds or even thousands of tiny gear parts, each the size of a grain of rice, densely packed together. They mesh and connect tightly, forming a complex and ingenious mechanical structure. The object, only the size of a fist, is like a world inside. Chen Qinger poked the crane, somewhat disappointed, and said, "But even though this thing is so sophisticated, it's impossible to drive it at." Chen Mo looked at the crane with a gentle expression. "It can move, but it needs spirit stones and an array." Chen Qinger was confused. "Spirit stones, formation, what are those?" Chen Mo didn't explain, but patted the girl's head. "Qinger, do you want to go see your mother's hometown? You haven't met your maternal grandparents yet." Chen Qinger, who had lived with her father since childhood, had thought about these things, but her father shouldered everything for the family and protected her. She simply didn't say anything or ask. Chen Qinger found it a little strange that Chen Mo brought it up at this moment. "Are you leaving the tea village? For so many years, although I've always wanted to see the world, it's still a little sad to say I have to leave now." Chen Mo said, "Didn't you used to hope to travel around like Brother Mew and the others?" Chen Qinger said, "Speaking of Ryuachin and the others, what will happen when they return to the tea village and can't find us after they leave? Time doesn't pass that quickly for the monks on the mountain. They're traveling too, and so are we. Maybe we'll meet again someday. You talk like you know everything about your father, like you're some kind of immortal. Tilda, by the way. Is mother's home far away?" "It's very far." Chen Mo tentatively asked, "Shall we wait until the snow stops and leave next year?" Chen Qinger nodded and smiled. Chen Mo said, "I'll go get the bowls and chopsticks. Let's eat first." The girl looked out the window at the snow-covered Meteor Dragon Mountains, wondering what kind of scenery lay on the other side of the view. Chen Mo got up and silently went to the roof beam, pulled down the talisman protecting the courtyard, and saw a map drawn on it with thin lines. He already knew the location of the point marked on the map. Those unforgettable, unbearable places we must go back to eventually. So, on the snow-covered Meteor Dragon Mountain range, a rustling sound broke the silence. A giant snake, more than 10 meters long, twisted its body toward the highest point of the mountain. A pale purple glow covered the shimmering scales, and the barrel-like body left snow marks. There were some thorns ahead, and the purple snake crawled through them, its fair, bare feet stepping on the snow. In the blink of an eye, the girl in the purple dress had her beautiful hair adorned with white snow. The girl exhaled a puff of white breath and strolled casually across the mountaintop. Humans are definitely more convenient, Tilda. I can't live without these legs anymore. I never get tired of seeing these scenes. After speaking, the girl in the purple dress paused for a moment, then slightly furrowed her delicate brows. Hey, come out and see the snow, Tilda. After saying that, the girl took out a large, seemingly dead white worm from her sleeve and threw it into the snow without hesitation. Boss, it's so cold. The white worm landed on the snow and began to wriggle and twist its plump body, crawling in the shadows. My whole body was covered in snow, and the more I twisted around, the colder I felt. The white worm said aggrievedly, "Aren't we snake demons? Wouldn't it be better to wait for spring in a warm cave on such a cold day?" The girl in the purple dress held up the picture book she had looked at many times and murmured, "Look at what we found in the wolf demon cave last time. There are so many novel things in the world now. I'm going to go down the mountain to travel. Also find that person." The girl in the purple dress looked down at the slacking white worm and complained, "Why haven't you reached the golden core stage yet?" The white worm was on the verge of tears. "Big sister, we're demons, not humans. Reaching the golden core stage takes at least 50 years and sometimes as long as 100. It's not that simple." Then she added quietly, "Of course, the eldest sister cannot be viewed as an ordinary person. No, she cannot be seen as a demon." The girl in the purple dress asked curiously, "You were already at the foundation establishment stage when I first met you. You've killed so many demons with me here. Aren't all those demon cores enough?" The white worm looked at the girl in the purple dress, and without explaining further, simply stood still and closed its eyes. Seeing this good-for-nothing, the girl in the purple dress turned her head away and said in a deliberately affected tone, "That would be a real shame. I'll just go down the mountain alone and go find Brother Mew by myself. Zyro by you? Just stay here and stay. You can come down the mountain alone when the time comes." Upon hearing this, the white worm swiftly rolled over and crawled to the girl's bare, white feet, lying down beside them, its voice trembling with tears. "No, no, no, the human world is too dangerous, unlike the era you described. What would I do without Big Sister? Next year, next spring, I will definitely forge the demon core and condense human form." The girl in the purple dress picked up the white worm, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Oh, Tilda, you said it yourself, Tilda." Chapter 87, What Happened Afterwards, Part 2. Shaling Sect. At this moment, the sect that was once the most bloody and noisy in the eastern continent was much quieter. At the entrances of those cave dwellings, white cloth strips were pasted on them at Zhang Moshen's behest. A year and a half later, most of the white cloths were tattered and worn from the wind and snow, but no one dared to remove them. Inside a grand hall, a black figure flew in from outside. A man in black knelt down and said, "Vice Sect Master, Linya requests an audience." Inside the hall sat a man who looked to be around 30 years old. The man waved his hand, signaling the other person to speak. The man named Linya took out a scroll and reported, "Vice Sect Master, the movements of the Tai Xuan Sword Sect this month are still as usual. The disciples we sent out to ambush the enemy cultivators last month were all wiped out." The deputy sect leader of the Shaling Sect, upon hearing the man's account of the events, showed no surprise and coldly replied, "Since the other side closed their sect, very few cultivators have come down the mountain, so they can't gain an advantage in these aspects. Now that the sect leader is in seclusion, and Shen Ling Xiao is also in seclusion, it's best not to let the disciples do these things. If there is a major battle, let's wait until the sect leader comes out of seclusion." The deputy sect leader of the Shaling Sect waved his hand, signaling Linya to step down. But Linya seemed to have thought of something else, and said again, "By the way, the female disciple who brought out the young master's remains is said to have also died in battle." The deputy sect leader of the Shaling Sect remained unmoved. "It's all right. Her purpose ended the moment she brought out the remains. She was just a foundation establishment disciple. But the important thing now is to stop the unnecessary casualties." Tai Xuan Sword Sect. After announcing its closure 6 months ago, the Tai Xuan Sword Sect, which usually boasts soaring sword energy, has lost some of its vitality. The occasional sounds of breakthroughs emanating from various cave dwellings prove that the cultivators here have not become decadent. Behind the law enforcement hall on the hill, At this moment, Bai Kayan, dressed in white robes, was holding a pot of hot wine in the courtyard, guarding a cave dwelling. Inside the cave, a young man sat cross-legged, his aura slowly rising. I'd like to see if you, Mo Liuxing, can actually fly. Bai Kayan remembered the strange incident her eldest disciple had mentioned earlier, and remembering his dramatic outburst, she paid a little more attention. Bai Kayan took a swig of wine and muttered to herself, making it sound so mysterious. It's just a chi-refining stage cultivator breaking through to the next realm. About half an hour later, the previously calm boy suddenly trembled, and a powerful aura emanated from his body. This aura was like that of an awakened tiger, gradually revealing its fangs and claws. Then, the boy's energy surged like a rocket, growing stronger and stronger. A dazzling light suddenly shone from inside the cave, as bright as the blazing sun, so intense that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. At the same time, the clouds in the sky seemed to be drawn by some mysterious force, converging towards the location of the cave. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed color, and the heavens and earth trembled. At this moment, Bai Kayan was leaning against the stone table, her exquisitely beautiful face flushed with a faint blush, slightly tipsy from drinking. He casually looked up and surveyed the cave interior. It seems like there's nothing wrong. No, what's going on? Bai Kayan frowned and unleashed her divine sense. A mysterious, ancient, solemn, and noble aura slowly emanated from the cave, instantly sobering the woman up. The clouds in the sky swirled above the cave like a vortex. Bai Kayan remembered Jiang Yao's instructions when she went down the mountain, so she took action to cover up the strange phenomenon. Just then, the mysterious and powerful aura inside the cave seemed to sense Bai Kayan's magic. The aura instantly became restless, like an enraged beast, full of dissatisfaction and hostility. Suddenly, a strong shockwave surged up inside the cave, shattering Bai Kayan's magic and creating an even bigger commotion. "Old man Kai, stop your seclusion and come out to help." Bai Kayan called out anxiously towards a nearby cave dwelling. After a moment of silence, a weathered voice rang out. "What trouble have you gotten into now?" Bai Kayan said irritably, "This isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing that you came out quickly." A moment later, a burst of sword light appeared, and an old man with white hair stood beside Bai Kayan. "Oh, this strange phenomenon. Could it be that one of my disciples from the enforcement hall has awakened his innate bloodline?" Bai Kayan frowned and said, "Let's not worry about that for now. Let's find a way to cover up this strange phenomenon." The white-haired old man glanced at Bai Kayan sideways, puzzled, and asked, "What do you still need to hide? Is someone eating people?" Bai Kayan didn't have time to explain. She just said, "Maybe, but just listen to me." The white-haired old man didn't say anything. He revealed his cultivation level at the peak of the nascent soul stage and severed the connection between Yun Jian and the boy with a sword light. The strange phenomena that had not yet appeared dissipated, as if deflated. Bai Kayan stroked her chin and asked curiously, would it be all right for him to disperse that strange phenomenon? It's all right. This kind of strange phenomenon is just a manifestation of the opportunities in this world. If I had to say something, it might affect that boy's attempt to show off. A moment later, a young man carrying a sword ran out of the cave, beaming with joy. "Master, you've broken through to the next realm with flying colors." Bai Kayan and the white-haired old man carefully examined the boy's appearance. Mo Liuxing asked, "Grandmaster Kai has also emerged from seclusion. Has something major happened? Could it be that the Shaling sect has attacked?" Bai Kayan ignored the boy and stared intently at him, observing his current appearance. On its already incredibly solid body, mysterious and dazzling black gold patterns had appeared. These patterns seemed to possess life, slowly flowing and shimmering with a captivating light. Each line was as if meticulously sculpted, exuding a breathtaking aura. The golden light gradually intensified, flowing freely across the body like a surging river. The white-haired old man stroked his equally white beard and said, "It is a sacred bone, the primordial sacred bone. If one can cultivate it and attain enlightenment, one will surely become an unparalleled powerhouse. Not only can one be immune to all poisons, but one's attacks also carry immense power, with an unstoppable force like a tidal wave. Moreover, once one reaches the upper three realms, every move will be imbued with Taoist principles, containing the ultimate truths of heaven and earth, and possessing astonishing power." "Master, what are you talking about?" Mo Liuxing felt uncomfortable with their gazes and looked at herself. "Holy crap, who the hell tattooed this on my body while I was breaking through to a higher realm?" The boy was startled and tried to rub off the ancient runes on his hand. "You can't get tattoos in the enforcement hall. Won't that make me unable to graduate from my apprenticeship and condemn me to a lifelong fate in the future? Looking at the strange condition on his body, the boy, on the verge of tears, poured out his grievances to Bai Kaiyan. Bai Kaiyan hissed, this an aura of dominance. The white-haired old man was somewhat speechless. It's a long and arduous task. He needs to teach this apprentice properly. Mo Liuxing looked completely bewildered. No, master, grandmaster, what are you talking about? Bai Kaiyan's eyes were filled with tenderness as she waved to the boy and said, it's nothing, go have fun. The boy straightened himself, shook his head, and his eyes hardened with determination. No, senior sister has gone down the mountain. I'll wait for her to come back here. The old man asked curiously, by the way, where is your eldest apprentice, Yayar? Bai Kaiyan sighed, she was ambushed by the Shaling sect when she went down the mountain. After returning, she seemed off as if she felt she had done something wrong. After discussing it with me, she went down the mountain. I suppose she has something to accomplish. So I let her go down the mountain. In a small town, a young girl walks through the snow with her head down and a paper umbrella in hand. Soon after, the girl arrived at a dilapidated wooden house. Her scarred hands stopped in front of the door, and she hesitated. But after a moment, he still knocked. Inside, after a series of footsteps, a middle-aged woman opened the door. The woman opened the door and looked out, seeing a short-haired girl covered in wounds. Oh, young lady, what's going on? The short-haired girl tried her best to smile. Is your Aunt Liu Ji's mother? My name is Jiang Yao. Chapter 88, What Happened Afterwards, Part 3. Sword Sect Back Mountain. The old man was stunned. Ambushed and killed by the Shaling sect. How did this happen? Bai Kaiyan rubbed her temples. Tusk, I think I forgot to tell you. To put it simply, our sect's holy maiden killed the other sect's young sect leader in a secret realm, and now the two sects are about to go to war. The old man tugged at his goatee, glared at Bai Kaiyan and said, you didn't even tell me about such a life or death matter for the sword sect. Bai Kaiyan shook her head and said, it's not that critical yet. Right now we're just testing each other. It won't get to that point. However, the sect's attitude is divided into two factions. Hao Rai Peak and Qing Yue Peak are clamoring to escalate the situation, while we and the other two peaks feel that Shen Qinghen's actions are really wrong. Even the disciples of Meteor Peak died in that secret realm, and were ultimately killed by Shen Qinghen. Shen Qinghen offered no explanation after emerging from the secret realm. We all agreed that the Holy Maiden was too extreme. She could have avoided it, yet she made a scene like this. If we act rashly and start a war, hundreds or even thousands of disciples might lose their lives because of the Holy Maiden's whim. So now the sect has activated its protective formation and summoned all the disciples back. Shen Lingxiao has gone into seclusion to seek a breakthrough, and there shouldn't be any major problems before he emerges. This mess is something only he can clean up. After listening, the old man frowned. In that case, I'll go back into seclusion. Maybe I can overcome this hurdle. Bai Kaiyan straightened up and bowed to the old man. Yes, thank you for troubling Elder Kai this time. The old man waved his hand without turning around. It's nothing. The woman had no idea where this so-called immortal sect was. She was simply taken aback when she heard the name the other person spoke of, a name she thought about constantly. Then she said somewhat nervously, my lord, may I ask how my daughter is doing now? Jiang Yao scratched her face. Miss Liu Ji, she's cultivation is very advanced. It's just that it's not convenient for her to come see you right now. The woman looked at Jiang Yao and sighed, recalling what the tall, strong man had said about the difference between immortals and mortals when Liu Ji was taken away. However, the woman nodded and said, thank you for your kindness, immortal sect. Whatever arrangements you make is fine, as long as it doesn't cause her any trouble. Jiang Yao had already made arrangements with the people under the Tai Xuan sword sect. The woman didn't have much luggage, not because she was in a hurry, but because she had been living alone for several years and had reduced the amount of things she needed. A simply decorated but elegant carriage moved slowly along the smooth road, its wheels making a soft creaking sound. Inside sat a woman, leaning quietly against the soft cushions, her gaze fixed on the distance through the window, her expression one of melancholy and loneliness. As time passed, the carriage gradually moved away from its original location and eventually arrived at a town near the Tai Xuan sword sect. The carriage stopped in a somewhat secluded spot on the edge of the town. The small house, neither luxurious nor shabby, exudes a sense of tranquility and peace. The person who contacted me has good taste. This place is indeed a good choice for someone living alone. The woman alighted from the carriage, walked slowly to the front of the house, raised her head and gazed at her own dwelling without much obvious emotional fluctuation. "It's a nice place. Quiet, it really suits me," the woman murmured softly as if talking to herself. Although the woman repeatedly declined, Jiang Yao still helped her with the relocation. After it was completed, she stayed in front of the small house for about half an hour. At the foot of Tai Xuanzong Mountain, the snow was like a thick velvet blanket, completely covering most of the mountain steps. At first glance, the world is covered in silver, a breathtaking sight. In the snow, Jiang Yao walked towards the mountain. At this moment, not far above the mountain steps, a girl, also covered in wounds, stood quietly with her arms crossed. Her gaze was fixed on Jiang Yao, who was slowly climbing, her eyes revealing a clear hint of impatience and urgency. Finally, she couldn't help but call out, "Why is it so slow?" Hearing the shouts, Jiang Yao looked up and glanced upwards. The girl looked at him with a reproachful expression, so he scratched his cheek and gave her a slightly apologetic smile. His already weary face now showed even more embarrassment. However, despite this, he chuckled and said to the girl above him, "I always feel like I've let you down. Let's go down the mountain after things calm down." The girl looked down at Jiang Yao, then snorted coldly. "If you're not as skilled, you lose. It's all up to you, this life is yours." Jiang Yao dragged her tired body to the girl's side. Although the girl's eyes were full of disdain, she still helped Jiang Yao up. The girl sighed, "So pathetic, I don't know how she managed to defeat me." Jiang Yao lowered her eyes and said, "I'm sorry." Suddenly, Liu Ji stretched out her slender finger and gently tapped Jiang Yao's forehead. This sudden action startled Jiang Yao. She looked up at Liu Ji with a somewhat bewildered expression. At this moment, Liu Ji looked at Jiang Yao seriously and said, "Since that's the case, then you'd better take responsibility for me." Looking at Liu Ji, who was speaking awkwardly and looking somewhat shy, Jiang Yao let out a sigh of relief. By the way, is it all right for me, as a disciple of the Shaling sect, to be taken back to the Taixuan sword sect by you like this? I've already mentioned it to my master. A child like you, who has never killed anyone and is still so innocent, can definitely be transformed. I'm innocent, you're the one who's treacherous and cunning. Honestly, I don't know how such an innocent little girl like you managed to get into the demonic spirit sect. Oh right, Jiang Yao. What's wrong? Thank you. On the mountain steps, two injured girls were arguing. Chapter 89, please advise. Zhangzhou Qin Valley. As the two most prominent and elegant sects on the mainland, Qin Valley was draped in a bright white veil by a heavy snowfall that lasted for months. Inside each building, people warmed wine and watched the snow fall, played the zither and played chess. The cultivators of Qin Valley were not so obsessed with cultivation. Inside the valley, a tranquil place. A small house facing north sits alone halfway up the mountain. From here, the entire Qin Valley scenery can be seen, which is truly magnificent. A thin layer of ice had formed over the small pond in the courtyard, but it did not affect the koi swimming below. The peach tree in the yard swayed gently, shaking off the accumulated snow. The indoor temperature was kept as normal by the array, unaffected by the winter weather, and a faint fragrance filled the air, creating a very peaceful atmosphere. A young girl opened the door, facing the wind and snow, glanced inside, then gently closed the door, picked up a paper umbrella, and went out. The martial arts arena, paved with hundreds of meters of white jade bricks, was now covered with a layer of snow. A beautiful young woman holding a flute stood in the center of the arena, with some fine snow on her shoulders. The girl wore a blue and white dress, resembling a blooming blue star flower. She held her breath and waited quietly. Below the stage, hundreds of young men and women in their early 20s, undeterred by the wind and snow, gathered in small groups around the martial arts arena, creating a lively atmosphere. The market has opened. How many moves can senior sister Qinwan hold out? A slightly chubby boy was shouting from the crowd below the stage. I bet 50 spirit stones on 20 moves or less. I bet I can last 50 moves. I'll wager 30 spirit stones. I'll bet within 10 moves. The other cultivators nearby held glittering spirit stones in their hands and threw them into the box in front of the slightly chubby cultivator. Before long, the box was filled with spirit stones. The slightly overweight cultivator counted the spirit stones. There were several hundred more. Now all we have to wait for is the unexpected result that always comes. The girl on stage with the flute was used to such behavior from the audience, but when it was her turn to go on stage, she still couldn't quite keep it in check. The girl exhaled a breath of stale air and shouted to the slightly chubby boy below the stage, "Zhang Quan." The noise from the audience immediately subsided. Then the slightly chubby young man stood at attention. Several female cultivators in the audience also took the opportunity to speak. Senior Sister Wanner is, after all, one of the top 10 inner disciples of our Chin Valley. Your criticism is really way too presumptuous. Another female cultivator nodded and said, Senior Sister Wanner has been in the Golden Core stage for several years now. In my opinion, she might win this time. Seeing that the audience seemed to have misunderstood her, Quinwan quickly waved her hand and said weakly, No, I meant to bet 50 spirit stones, betting that I could last 100 moves against her. Upon hearing this, the audience gasped in shock. Hissed Tilda. Even the senior sister on stage lacked confidence. Another cultivator asked, That junior sister seems to have just broken through to the Golden Core stage, right? A fellow cultivator nearby reminded her. She only came to our Chin Valley a year and a half ago. At that time, that junior sister was barely at the early foundation establishment stage, but now she's already at the Golden Core stage. The monk didn't finish his sentence, but the meaning was self-evident. Quinwan sighed and said, It mainly relies on the highest grade Golden Core, breaking through to the 9th grade Golden Core realm. 9th rank. It should be known that in the thousands of years of Chin Valley's inheritance, there have only been a handful of people who have achieved the 9th grade Golden Core. Those in the audience couldn't help but feel a pang of regret upon realizing this. It's a pity that this junior sister is from Chin Valley. As everyone was discussing, someone shouted something from somewhere, and then everyone's gaze turned to another direction of the martial arts arena. A girl in a white dress, holding a paper umbrella, slowly walked towards the martial arts stage. At this moment, all sounds fell silent in unison, and everyone just watched the newcomer quietly. The person who came was a 16-year-old girl. The girl had grown considerably taller than she had a year and a half ago. She was wearing a white dress that was very simple, elegant, pure, and sacred, like a blooming, graceful epiphyllum. That face, which had lost its childishness, was like a miracle, flawless, with skin as white as snow and delicate as if it could be broken with a touch. Her eyes, like dazzling rubies, sparkled with a bright light, without the slightest hint of seductiveness, but rather exuding a transcendent divinity. The young girl walked lightly onto the stage, like a fairy descending to earth under the fervent gazes of the crowd. The girl gently folded up the paper umbrella. Her jade-like hand rose slightly to catch a snowflake, her eyes revealing no emotion. Everyone recalled that they had never seen the girl smile in the past year and a half. The snowflakes lingering on her fingertips slowly melted before the girl turned to look at Quinwan on the stage. Then a calm, serene female voice rang out. Senior Sister Quen, please give me your guidance. The girl took a step forward, and in an instant, the snow on the stage melted away. The martial arts arena, which was originally bitterly cold and covered in ice and snow, has now become as hot and unbearable as summer, as if a blazing sun is hanging overhead. As the girl took that step, a dazzling halo suddenly appeared behind her like a brilliant sun. This ring radiates endless light and heat, making the surrounding air seem to distort and deform. A light sheen of sweat appeared on Quinwan's forehead, and even the flow of her spiritual energy seemed to stagnate. Looking at her, Quinwan felt that the word goddess was no longer an adjective at this moment. The female cultivators below the martial arts stage looked at that figure, and it was hard to say whether they felt envy or jealousy. All sorts of emotions from the crowd turned into sighs. Quinwan gritted her teeth and said in a deep voice, Junior Sister Jiang, please don't hold back. Jiang Ruochen's face remained expressionless. She simply gave a curt reply. After Quinwan finished speaking, a dazzling blue light suddenly appeared on the flute in her hand, as bright and dazzling as the stars. Immediately afterwards, Quinwan's figure retreated rapidly, as if lifted by an invisible force, rising slowly like a light feather, and finally coming to a steady stop above the martial arts stage. She gently raised her red lips and lightly touched the green flute in her hand, accompanied by a melodious flute sound. At the same time, countless ferocious-looking giant beast illusions suddenly appeared on the martial arts stage. They roared and howled, baring their fangs and claws as they fiercely pounced on Jiang Ruochen. Some of these behemoths were as large as mountains, while others were as agile as lightning. Each of them exuded a terrifying aura that sent chills down one's spine. The white dress made her look somewhat small at that moment. Jiang Ruochen remained calm and slowly raised her hand, saying, Divine punishment. With a single sound, countless beams of light instantly erupted from the halo behind him, annihilating the giant beast illusion. However, Jiang Ruochen's magic did not stop at this moment. The beams of light that appeared seemed endless, all heading towards Quinwan, whose face was filled with shock. Quinwan quickly dodged to the side, but the beam of light continued unabated. In just a moment, the spot where they stood was completely covered by a pillar of light radiating intense heat. Quinwan was trapped by an extremely tricky maneuver. However, after exchanging only a few blows, Quinwan was defeated. Below the martial arts arena, all was silent. Jiang Ryuachin withdrew her spell. "Senior sister, you flatter me." Chapter 90 Cold. Below the martial arts arena, the crowd looked at Quinwan, who had already been defeated, with some disbelief. The cultivators of Chin Valley are indeed not good at head-on combat, but they seem to have lost too decisively. Whether the technique counts as one of 100 moves or just one move is debatable, but that's not what Jiang Ryuachin is worried about. The girl ignored what happened next, simply picked up the paper umbrella and left. As Jiang Ryuachin walked along a pavilion, a girl in a black dress appeared in front of her. Kjai walked up to Jiang Ryuachin, looked at the stunningly beautiful girl who was now as tall as him, and smiled slightly. Kjai stepped forward and brushed the snow off Jiang Ryuachin's hair, asking, "How is it?" "Usual. It's the winter solstice, and the young master asked me to bring Sister Ryuachin over to celebrate the festival together." Jiang Ryuachin said softly, "Thank you, Sister Kjai, but I still need to cultivate." Kjai patted Jiang Ryuachin's head. "I'm just a little worried about you." Jiang Ryuachin looked up and smiled. "No need, I'll keep my composure. As long as I continue cultivating, I might be able to help Master. If there were anyone else here, they would definitely be surprised to hear that junior sister Jiang can actually laugh." Kjai frowned slightly, looking at Jiang Ryuachin's forced smile. He could see the disappointment in her eyes, but he didn't point it out. You need to understand that burying yourself entirely in cultivation isn't necessarily a good thing. Jiang Ryuachin lowered her head and did not say anything. "Sister, I'm going back now." Then the light dissipated, leaving only Kjai behind. In a quiet workshop in Chin Valley, a scruffy, bearded young man wearing a single-lensed spectacle was studying a detailed notebook. On the table were rare treasures worth tens of thousands of spirit stones. A series of footsteps sounded, and Ning Xianqi put down the items he was holding and asked towards the door, "How is it, fellow Taoist Jiang's condition?" However, Kjai, who was standing at the door, did not immediately push the door open and enter. Instead, he stood there quietly for a moment before recounting the events that had just occurred. "I'm worried that Ryuachin won't be able to hold on like this. Something is clearly not right." Ning Xianqi shook his head and said, "This is all the help we can offer. If we interfere, it will only make things worse. Ultimately, it all depends on whether he wakes up or not." Kjai couldn't help but ask, "If your spiritual sea is shattered and then healed, it's equivalent to dying hundreds of times. Can your divine consciousness really withstand that?" Ning Xianqi put down the boundary origin glass in his hand and stroked his chin. "I don't know, but isn't he always able to surprise us?" Kjai outside the door wanted to say something, but before he could speak, the door, which had not been opened for a long time, creaked open, and Ning Xianqi walked out from inside. Kjai frowned again. "Young master, you've lost weight again. What have you been doing?" Ning Xianqi smiled and said, "No, I have things I have to do. But now, let's go eat first." Deliberately avoiding the girl in the white dress who had stopped at the winding path, he did not return to the cottage where he lived. Instead, he headed towards another nearby hilltop. Soon after, a similarly tranquil and rustic courtyard came into view. Jiang Ryuachin arrived at the courtyard with practiced ease, pushed open the slightly old fence gate, and walked straight in. As you enter the courtyard, you can see a young girl with her face covered by a black veil sitting under the eaves of the small house. The girl was wearing only a thin garment, and her fair and slender feet were exposed, while her ankles were tightly bound by a shackle that shimmered with a dazzling golden light. Jian Shear had already sensed someone approaching, but she didn't make a move. She just sat there quietly without any action or reaction. Jiang Ryuachin quickly walked to the girl's side, lowered her head and showed no expression, then pushed Giant 12 off the door frame and pressed herself against Giant 12. Immediately afterwards, Jiang Ryuachin reached out and grabbed the black veil on the girl's face without hesitation, tearing it off to reveal the face hidden behind the veil. "How long are you going to keep running away?" With that angry shout, another breathtakingly beautiful face slowly emerged from beneath the veil. The most striking feature is the pair of eyes. One side is as pure and white as a flawless snowflake, while the other resembles a dazzling golden gemstone. A look of panic flashed across Giant 12's face as he struggled desperately, trying to break free from Jiang Ryuachin's grasp. The girl gritted her teeth and said, Give it back to me. However, it was to no avail, as the incomparably powerful light energy emanating from Jiang Ryuachin surged forth like a raging tide. This immense power firmly suppressed Sword 12 to the ground, rendering it completely immobile. Jiang Ryuachin retorted angrily, "Master did it all for someone like you. It's not worth it, it's not worth it. How long are you going to keep running away? You know perfectly well enough." Jiang Ryuachin pressed down on Giant 12, her eyes fixed on Giant 12, who was lying on the ground. Upon hearing this, Giant 12 slowly turned his head away, ignoring Jiang Ryuachin, and murmured to himself, "Why did you save me? I'm a suicide soldier, Jian Jiu is dead. Why did I survive?" Jiang Ryuachin shouted, "Because you are not Dark Sword. Because Shen Lingxiao and Shen Qinghen are the ones who framed you." Sword 12's face contorted in pain. "No, I am." Jiang Ryuachin stood up, looking at Giant 12 with a face full of disappointment. "Actually, I wasn't taking my anger out on the person in front of me. It was just that I hated myself a little." With a tearing pain in her heart, Jiang Ryuachin tried to calm herself down. "I hope you can cherish your eyes and take a good look at the world that should have been yours. At that time, I will release you from my grasp." Jiang Ryuachin lowered her eyes. Then the wind and snow began to rise, and Jiang Ryuachin disappeared. Giant 12 rolled over and groped to pick up the black veil from the ground. A strange world appeared as she opened her eyes. The girl stood there, hesitant and conflicted, her heart filled with fear, turmoil, and a touch of curiosity. The girl kneeling under the eaves remained silent for a long time. Then she scooped up a handful of snow. The girl held the ordinary winter snow in her hands and looked at it for a long time, until her hands were already red. After returning to her small house, Jiang Ryuachin meditated and practiced her spiritual cultivation as usual. It wasn't until late at night that the girl stopped, and in her hand appeared the exquisite little book left by her master, on which the mental cultivation methods and insights were all written in delicate, small, regular script. However, the girl had never encountered the cultivation bottlenecks mentioned in the book. She just habitually took it out to look at it a few more times. Night had fallen, and the outside world was shrouded in darkness. A biting wind howled, whipping up a flurry of snowflakes that blanketed the earth. Yet this raging storm could not penetrate even a fraction of the interior. After taking a bath, Jiang Ryuachin exuded a faint fragrance, and her long hair, cascading like a waterfall, was casually draped over her shoulders. The girl walked to the bedside, gently lifted the warm quilt with her delicate hand, and curled up inside. On the bed, the young man with a full head of silver hair lay quietly. Although his breathing was steady, he had not yet woken up from his coma. Jiang Ryuachin carefully extended her slender, fair hand and gently tugged at the corner of the boy's clothes. Only by doing this could her anxious heart find some peace, and only then could she fall asleep peacefully. The girl gazed quietly at the boy's handsome profile, and in a soft voice recounted the events of the day. As drowsiness crept in, the girl's bright red eyes slowly closed. "Master Ryuachin feels a little cold." The girl curled up, her voice trembling slightly. The bed was warm, but the girl seemed to have returned to the charred ruins of Suzhou. Chapter 91, White Hair. Daylight broke. The old hut stood quietly in the snow, appearing somewhat lonely and desolate. Thick snow piled up on the eaves, like a white velvet blanket covering them. A large clump of snow seemed to want to break the tranquility and slid down slightly. The snow made a sound as it fell. At the same time, the tranquility of this little house, which had always been little known and had only been visited by a handful of people, was instantly shattered. The air inside seemed to freeze, eerily still. However, the sound of snow pounding down shattered that silence. However, the unusual thing was coming from inside the house. Cough, cough. The boy coughed, opened his eyes, and saw a spotless ceiling that was truly unfamiliar this time. The joints that hadn't been used for a long time made a sound. I struggled to sit up, only to find that my hands seemed to be tightly entangled by something. Caught off guard, the boy lost his balance and fell heavily off the bed, landing hard on the cold, hard floor. Lying on the ground, he was momentarily bewildered. He slowly raised his hand, revealing a few strands of silver-white hair entwined around his fingertips. These strands of hair were as soft and clear as moonlight, shimmering faintly in the dim light, although they appeared somewhat disheveled from the fall. Still not fully awake and confused, Mu Yungui stared at the silver thread in his hand and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Such beautiful hair! After a short while, Mu Yungui, having regained some of his senses, frowned again and said, "It's way too long." Then Mu Yungui slowly stood up, gently stretched his slightly stiff body, and began to carefully look around. Exquisite sandalwood furniture. These pieces exude a unique fragrance, and the gorgeous silk screens are embroidered with exquisite patterns in vibrant yet soft colors, complementing the surrounding environment perfectly. Then look at the source of the faint sandalwood incense, which is lit next to a small and exquisite stove. What a tranquil and elegant place. When he turned his gaze to the window, he saw a vast expanse of white. Mu Yungui was somewhat unsure how long he had been unconscious. Mu Yungui slowly walked to the table, his gaze casually sweeping across the surface before finally settling on an exquisite water glass. He reached out, gently picked up the water glass, brought it close to his nose, and smelled it. It seemed that a faint fragrance still lingered on the rim of the glass. But he didn't pay much attention and drank all the water in it. After drinking the water, Mu Yungui still felt weak and powerless, and his steps were even a little unsteady. He took a deep breath, tried to steady himself, and continued walking forward. Before long, he came to a huge bronze mirror. Mu Yungui stood quietly in front of the bronze mirror, staring at the reflection of the person in it, and was momentarily stunned. The person in the mirror had a fair and jade-like face, with a slight thinness, and long, silvery white hair that was softly draped over her shoulders. Her once well-proportioned and powerful body now appeared somewhat delicate and frail. Upon seeing the aloof beauty reflected in the bronze mirror, Mu Yungui subconsciously touched his lower body. The item is still there. Mu Yungui brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, feeling a little uneasy. How much time has passed? After the battle at the rift in the secret realm, the immense spiritual energy nearly shattered Mu Yungui to pieces. Fortunately, at that time, his obsession pierced his body and penetrated his dantian. The spiritual liquid healed his injuries frantically before bursting his body. This weakened the power of the heavenly essence liquid considerably. But none of these are the most important things. The most important thing is the cultivation method, the extreme sword technique, with 108 acupoints frantically circulating spiritual energy, plus several key acupoints illuminated by the gift of heaven, even after the injuries were healed. The spiritual energy that was enough to burst a golden core only destroyed Mu Yungui's meridians and acupoints. His divine sense was torn apart, shattered, and then reassembled by intense pain. The meridians and acupoints also undergo another cycle. Mu Yungui estimated that he had died about 80 times. Fortunately, possessing the divine senses of 2 lifetimes, coupled with the golden rainbow, imbued with dragon's might left behind after slaying the dragon, allowed Mu Yungui to preserve his divine senses after the raging storm shattered them. And once you get through the first one, the subsequent spiritual energy storms will only get smaller and smaller. It is unknown how much time has passed, but Mu Yungui has finally regained control of his body. And by recklessly circulating the extreme sword heart technique, all 108 acupoints in his body, excluding the Qi-Si, have expanded more than twice. It has only just awakened, and the reconstructed Qi-Si meridians and acupoints cannot circulate spiritual energy for the time being. Otherwise, without the help of the heavenly essence liquid, if it were to break down again, it would never be able to be repaired. Now an ordinary person, Mu Yungui sighed, gazing at the somewhat unfamiliar face, and murmured, "Did the physical reconstruction cause it to look like this?" Mu Yungui pinched his face, which had become somewhat soft after his physical body was reconstructed. His handsome face, coupled with his striking white hair, made him somewhat androgynous. They should be in Qin Valley right now. Let's find Ryuachin and Ning Xianqi first. Mu Yun calmed himself down, wearing only the thin inner lining, then pushed open the door and stepped out. The sun came out and the sunlight was so bright on the snow that it was almost blinding. A cold wind blew by, and Mu Yungui turned around and closed the door without hesitation, then quickly went to the stove. After a long silence, Mu Yungui glanced at the wardrobe in the room again. There were only a few white dresses, all of which were the style worn by female cultivators. Hiss. Mu Yungui's expression was somewhat solemn. Chapter 92, Junior Sister Jiang, Junior Brother. Her long, silvery white hair, cascading down to her waist like a waterfall, was now tightly tied into a high ponytail by Mu Yungui with a thin black rope. The originally loose sleeves of her snow-white dress were also carefully gathered, adding to her heroic air. Mu Yungui looked at it, and although he was still a little confused, this was the only thing he could do at the moment. He pushed open the door and took a long-awaited breath of fresh air. Although the modified fairy robe on his body unsurprisingly blocked the cold wind, the directness of the air hitting him still made him feel a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, the wind wasn't too strong, and with the sunshine, it would gradually warm up before long. Mu Yungui followed the mountain path. The scenery was truly beautiful, and descending the mountain slowly on foot wasn't too bothersome. After a while, Mu Yungui, who had just reached the bottom of the mountain, was pondering which way to go. A gentle breeze ruffled the silvery white hair, and the boy, whose nose was slightly red from the cold, was quite dazzling in the sunlight. It really is better to stay indoors, Mu Yungui thought to himself. Junior sister, when did you enter the valley? I don't think I've ever seen you before. Mu Yungui heard a clear male voice, but ignored it. Wait a minute, is it calling me? Mu Yungui reluctantly turned around and saw a handsome and elegant young man, about 20 years old, wearing a silver crown. I don't know your name, junior sister. The boy had just witnessed that scene, and the girl before him possessed a unique beauty that was simply too special. For some reason, he couldn't help but call out to her. However, upon arriving at Mu Yungui's side, the young man was at a loss for what to do about his presumptuous actions and stood awkwardly in place. Mu Yungui's expression was somewhat unpleasant, and he hesitated whether to speak. After a long while, the boy standing to the side finally mustered his courage and stammered, haltingly. I observe that junior sister's face is as pale as paper, devoid of any color, and her body seems quite weak. I wonder if she needs my assistance. Mu Yungui hesitated for a moment, but still spoke. Would it be better if I didn't say anything? Upon hearing Mu Yungui's voice, the young man staggered. Junior brother. Mu Yungui clasped his hands in greeting and replied, My name is Mu Yungui. The male cultivator wiped away non-existent sweat and introduced himself. Hello, junior brother Mu. My name is Zyro King. You can just call me senior brother Zyro. Although she knew it might be presumptuous, Zyro King couldn't help but ask. I wonder why junior brother Mu is dressed like this. So it really isn't quite right. Mu Yungui glanced around at his clothes and said to Zyro King, Does senior brother Zyro have any extra clothes? Due to some reasons, Before Mu Yungui could finish speaking, Zyro King waved her hand, quickly interrupting Mu Yungui's explanation. No, this is fine. Mu Yungui gazed into the distance. I was injured earlier and have been recuperating. It's normal that you haven't seen me. I'm going to take a stroll around the sect now. Oh, I see. Upon hearing this, Zyro King remembered her original purpose and said to Mu Yungui, Junior sister Jiang is going to spar with senior brother Zhang later. If junior brother Mu is not in a hurry, go and observe. You might gain some insights into cultivation. Junior sister Jiang, Mu Yungui narrowed his eyes. Zyro King looked at him with some surprise. Junior brother Mu doesn't even know junior sister Jiang. Mu Yungui asked again, Is it strange that I don't know what she said? Zyro King's expression changed upon hearing this. Are there any disciples in Qin Valley who don't know junior sister Jiang? She has an unparalleled beauty and invincible talent. I have been staying in the valley for a short period of time since I was brought back as a guest by the young master a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago. Mu Yungui sighed, originally thinking only half a year had passed. A year is not a long time for an ordinary cultivator, and Mu Yungui did not feel it was long either. However, the girl beside him might feel it was a long time, so a year or so would be a long time in Mu Yungui's eyes. Zyro King continued speaking. At that time, the young valley master said that as long as he could defeat junior sister Jiang in the same realm, he could directly advance to the inner sect. But this junior sister, Jiang, is like a goddess descended to earth. The power of light within her seems inexhaustible. As Mu Yungui listened to Zyro King's almost divine description, he smiled slightly. Wasn't this so different from his own adorable disciple? You call that cute little girl a goddess? However, a year and a half has passed, and no cultivator of the same realm has yet defeated junior sister Jiang. At this point, Zyro King, a disciple of Qin Valley, felt somewhat disappointed. Mu Yungui stepped forward and patted the somewhat dejected Zyro King on the shoulder to comfort her. Alas, our Qin sect cultivates its Tao through music and is not good at fighting. It's normal for us to be a little weaker than others of the same level. And perhaps junior sister Jiang's master is a powerful figure. Upon hearing this, Zyro King nodded in agreement. Junior brother Mu is right after all. The young valley master said that junior sister Jiang's master is a sword immortal in the integration stage. It makes sense. Otherwise, how could he have taught such a perfect disciple? Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui exclaimed, Ah, is that really true? I had no idea. Well, it's normal for someone of the same cultivation level to consistently outclass us. Zyro King countered. Is it normal for someone who has just entered the Golden Core stage to defeat senior sister Quenwan, who is in the mid-Golden Core stage, in a single move? Mu Yungui was about to continue comforting him when he paused, then quickly asked, Golden Core. Mu Yungui asked, you only entered the valley a year and a half ago. What was Ryuachin's cultivation level at that time? Xiao Qingj replied, at that time, junior sister Jiang had just entered the foundation establishment stage. Wait, junior brother Mu Yu. Xiao Qingj seemed to remember something, and suddenly became somewhat serious, quickly covering Mu Yungui's mouth. How dare you? How can you be so disrespectful to junior sister Jiang? How can you address her like that, so disrespectful to our distinguished guest in the valley? If the young valley master finds out you're finished, senior sister will beat you to a pulp. After calming herself down, Xiao Qingj continued, although my junior brother is indeed, cough cough, no matter how good-looking he is, he can't be like this. After hearing this, Mu Yungui nodded, feeling somewhat relieved. At least in Qin Valley, Ning Xianqi and Xai still cared about Ryuachin quite a bit. Xiao Qingj released her hand from Mu Yungui's, looked around, and then felt relieved. Seeing this, Xiao Qingj slowly explained, as honored guests of our Qin Valley, many disciples have gained their own insights into combat after sparring with us. Although most of them were defeated by overwhelming force. Mu Yungui nodded. Can we use stones from other mountains to polish jade? Xiao Qingj wholeheartedly agreed with this statement. Yes, junior sister Jiang can indeed be considered that mountain. Mu Yungui said to Xiao Qingj, I want to go see that, junior sister Jiang. Xiao Qingj wasn't surprised that the young man was interested in junior sister Jiang. Instead, she smiled smugly. Then you'd better keep your composure. Junior sister Jiang has an unparalleled beauty. Don't let her cloud your judgment. That soft, adorable face flashed through Mu Yungui's mind. Is it right? At this moment, Mu Yungui began to doubt whether he was talking about the same person as the person in front of him. Chapter 93, Let's Split It 3070. Qin Valley Martial Arts Arena. Compared to the previous temperature, most people felt that it was much better today. So the number of people coming down from the training ground was more than double, and they were all quietly waiting for the protagonist to arrive. Below the stage, the slightly chubby young man, Zhang Quan, was holding a box filled with dazzling spirit stones. At this moment, the boy's eyes were almost reduced to slits. Come on, place your bets now, place your bets now. Zhang Quan shouted around the huge training ground, and the crowd was used to it. A girl in a blue dress walked over from the side. It was Quinwan from that day. Hey, Zhang Quan. Quinwan cautiously walked to Zhang Quan's side, her hands behind her back, clutching something in her hands. Zhang Quan stopped shouting and greeted Quinwan. Hello, senior sister. Quinwan suddenly smiled and said in a friendly greeting, the weather is really nice today. Look at the sun, it's so sunny, tilde. Zhang Quan looked at the acting skills of this senior sister who had lost to Jiang Shaimai a few days ago. If the score was out of 10, her current appearance would only get 2 points. Just as Quinwan was about to speak again, Zhang Quan interrupted her. Senior sister, do you want to ask if there's betting on who wins or loses? Zhang Quan lowered his voice and quietly approached Quinwan. Quinwan, whose thoughts had been guessed, looked somewhat guilty. Nonsense. Senior brother Zhang is almost at the peak of the Golden Core stage, and the techniques he cultivates are extraordinary killing techniques. Moreover, the difference in their cultivation levels is so great, this is just too outrageous. Quinwan tried her best to explain, but her fingers were still unconsciously fiddling with her hair, appearing somewhat absent-minded. Zhang Quan looked at Quinwan, trying his best to remain calm and silent. After a while, Quinwan couldn't help but sigh and groan. Then a hint of mischief flashed across her beautiful face, as she leaned closer to Zhang Quan and asked curiously, So what? Zhang Quan smirked. I'm betting on junior sister Jiang to win. Cough, cough. Upon hearing this, Quinwan straightened up with a start, very naturally stuffed the 100 spirit stones in her hand into Zhang Quan's hand, and then left with small, quick steps. Although I really want to support senior brother Zhang, I still have to make sure I profit. Zhang Quan shook his head, gazing at the departing figures of the group, and pondered for a moment. This seems to be the 15th senior student to ask this question. Then he looked at the spirit stones that senior brother Zhang had bet on his own sect, which were only around 500, while on the other side, 5,000. Zhang Quan looked at these facts that absolutely could not be made public, and his eyes revealed a resolute look. If you were to say that out loud, you might be drowned in spittle. After thinking for a while, Zhang Quan smiled again, since everyone had already done it anyway. On the martial arts stage, a handsome young man dressed in white, wearing a cloud-patterned cloth crown and a crane cloak sat cross-legged, resting with his eyes closed. A magnificent ancient zither, resembling clouds and mist, was placed in front of the boy, its strings seemingly vibrating slightly. The hundreds of people present had different focuses. Some were looking at the stage, while others were waiting for the main character. Meanwhile, a considerable commotion was also caused on one side of the martial arts stage. Everyone recognized Xiao Qingge, but he had brought an extremely beautiful junior sister with him from somewhere. That head of white hair was quite striking. The arrival of Mu Yungui and Xiao Qingge attracted a lot of attention. At this moment, the area around the martial arts arena was bustling with people, but the main character that everyone was eagerly waiting for was nowhere to be seen. A strange yet striking figure appeared on the martial arts stage, hard to miss. He was tall and slender, his white robes fluttering in the wind, making him appear as ethereal and otherworldly as a celestial being descended to Earth. However, upon closer inspection, his delicate face appeared slightly pale, as if he had just recovered from a long illness, giving him a sickly appearance. "Look at that person over there. I've never seen him before," came a gasp from the crowd. "Look at that appearance. There's a unique kind of sickly beauty," another voice chimed in. "But don't you guys think he looks a bit like a man?" Mu Yungui was completely unaware of these discussions. Although Qin Valley is a renowned, elegant place in both the Eastern Continent and Maoyan Immortal Valley, the cultivators of Qin Valley do not prohibit such gambling in private. Following the fine tradition of Qin Valley, Xiao Qingge walked to Zhang Quan's side, handed him more than 10 spirit stones, whispered a few words, then her expression turned to shock and then to a meaningful smile. Mu Yungui was a little curious, so he went forward to take a look. Xiao Qingge explained it to the boy. Zhang Quan was also shocked when he saw the white-haired girl in front of him. At first glance, I was amazed, but then I wondered how Qin Valley could have such a person whom I did not know. It should be noted that, although Zhang Quan considered himself to be a complete novice in cultivation, he was certainly clueless about it. Although he was not suited for cultivation, Zhang Quan was subtly influenced by his parents' special status as elders in charge of managing the valley's resources from a young age. Having witnessed and heard about it for a long time, he became extremely skilled at making money, a skill he could only excel at. Mu Yungui asked curiously, "Judging from this entourage, did you make a lot of money on this trip, senior brother?" Zhang Quan was stunned when he heard Mu Yungui's slightly weak voice. The person in front of him was actually a man. However, he wasn't too surprised. He slowly explained, "This was arranged by the young master. I was just entrusted to be a junior shop assistant. As for the spirit stones received, if we only consider the commission, the profit will be split 30-70. Mu Yungui leaned closer, frowning. "How come it's only 70%? Zhang Quan said, "70% belongs to junior sister Jiang, and the remaining 30% depends on the young valley master's opinion." Mu Yungui stroked his chin, a look of confusion on his face. "Huh, these spirit stones have to be divided among junior sister Jiang." Zhang Quan nodded. "Yes, after all, as a distinguished guest, she may not want it, but we can't refuse to give it to her." Having said that, Mu Yungui was filled with doubt and wanted to ask more questions. However, at that moment, the young man on the stage, who had been sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, seemingly isolated from the world, suddenly stirred. The young man slowly opened his eyes, which had been closed for a long time. Then he stood up unhurriedly, his movements light and elegant. After getting up, the boy did not take any immediate action, but instead gently plucked the strings of the Yunxia Gyukin at his feet. The Gyukin suddenly emitted a faint halo, as if it had been given life and slowly floated up, eventually hovering steadily beside the boy. The senior student surnamed Zhang stood there quietly with his hands behind his back. For a moment, the entire training ground fell into a deathly silence, and everyone's eyes were focused on the training platform, because a girl in a white dress had already arrived here. Chapter 94, but he's a sword cultivator. The person who had been stealing the attention from Mu Yungui now walked lightly onto the stage step by step. The girl, who always amazes everyone who has seen her, is dressed almost the same as before, except that her jet black hair is tied up with a red rope and a sword is at her waist. The pale pink scabbard of Lyrachu was tucked into the girl's white dress, and the engraved peach blossom added to its beauty. Below the stage, Mu Yungui looked at the white dress with a rather interesting expression on his face. Mu Yungui tugged at Xiao Qingge's clothes, pointed at Jiang Ruochen, and then pinched the air with his index finger and thumb. Xiao Qing smiled faintly. Seeing Jiang Shaimai's disciple like this for the first time wasn't surprising. However, wasn't the expression on the person beside her a bit too exaggerated? At this moment, a million alpacas raced through Mu Yungui's mind. Holy crap, where's my little lowly apprentice? Where is that tiny, well-behaved apprentice? What about those soft cheeks? The shelf life is way too short. Mu Yungui looked at his little apprentice on the stage, and the girl's figure overlapped with the image of the fearsome demon Empress from his previous life. However, their temperaments were quite different. In her past life, Jiang Ryuachen's smile was tinged with despair, but now Ryuachen exudes a cool and aloof aura, like the ice and snow on a mountain peak, cold and noble. The divine essence emanating from the divine heart within her made her appear as if a goddess had descended to earth, sacred and inviolable. Now Mu Yungui understood the long string of descriptive words Xiao Qing had used. Zhang Chen stared intently at the person who had just arrived. The girl who habitually concealed her aura looked absolutely stunning. If it were the first time they met, no one would think that this girl could have any overwhelming sense of pressure. However, his undefeated record since entering the valley is undeniable. Zhang Chen flexed his beautifully shaped fingers. Many cultivators in Qin Valley actually practice other musical instruments. Although Zhang Chen cultivates the spiritual zither, which is the subject of most disciples, his cultivation method is not a common soul attack or auxiliary technique, but a very special path of killing. He's already reached the late golden core stage. In a few years, he might be able to break through to the nascent soul stage before he turns 30. Once a disciple of Qin Valley reaches the nascent soul stage, they have much more freedom. They can choose to open a cave within the valley to begin their pursuit of higher realms or serve as an outer sect elder. However, Zhang Chen had already decided to descend the mountain at that time, to slay demons and pacify the land. At this moment, Zhang Chen was also inexplicably nervous. Facing the junior sister in front of him was his first battle before going down the mountain. After a moment, Zhang Chen made up his mind. It's said that the cultivators of Qin Valley are not good at fighting, but today we'll show our fellow disciples. Zhang Chen said, Junior Sister Jiang, I am Zhang Chen, a late-stage golden core cultivator specializing in the zither. Please give me your guidance. Although Junior Sister Jiang is exceptionally strong, I may not be able to grant her wish this time. Jiang Ryuachen's calm voice rang out. In any case, we should give it a try. Thus, the battle began. Jiang Ryuachen parted her lips slightly, her voice trembling. Ning. As the words fell, countless tiny particles, like golden dust, suddenly rained down on the battlefield. These golden dust particles shimmered faintly in the air, like a dream. Standing not far away, Zhang Chen keenly sensed a slight stagnation in the energy within his body. He frowned slightly, but without hesitation, he extended his right hand and forcefully plucked the strings of the gyukin. The music began. In an instant, a powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body, like a surging tide, violently crashing against the golden dust. With a deafening roar, the golden dust that filled the sky was instantly shattered by this powerful aura and vanished without a trace. However, the stirring music did not stop. As his fingers plucked the strings rapidly, countless sharp sonic blades shot out like raging waves, hurtling towards Jiang Ryuachen with boundless power. The girl slowly raised her slender, jade-like hand and gently pointed forward. Instantly, a thick golden beam of light descended from the sky, crashing straight to the ground and kicking up a cloud of dust. The golden beam of light, like an impregnable fortress, stood in front of Jiang Ryuachen, attempting to block the oncoming sonic blade. Immediately following was a deafening explosion. The golden beam of light collided violently with the sonic blade, unleashing a dazzling light and a deafening sound. The surrounding air was distorted by the violent impact, and the pillar of light shattered, turning into specks of golden light that dissipated into the air. The sonic blades, undeterred, continued their relentless charge towards Jiang Ryuachen with overwhelming force. However, the girl's magic did not stop. It flowed with light once more, erecting a golden back wall. The energy collided and dissipated. Even the formation on the training ground, which was capable of withstanding attacks from the nascent soul stage, flashed with a dazzling light. The relentless sonic blades continued to strike at the girl, but the spells she conjured could only defend against them, leaving her with no opportunity to retaliate. The scene drew gasps of surprise from the audience. Seeing this, Mu Yungui was not surprised, but noticed that Ryuachen would advance a few feet each time she blocked an attack. Although the training ground is hundreds of meters wide, It may seem insignificant to withstand the attack and walk only a few meters, but for Qin Ziu, it would be absolutely fatal. The constant attacks depleted the spiritual energy of the two on stage. Jiang Ruochen could only passively defend herself, and this unparalleled junior sister, Jiang, looked somewhat frustrated at this moment. Although Zhang Chen was also a little tired, he felt very reassured. The battle was longer than ever before, and the people below the stage no longer cared how many moves they had exchanged, and even the stakes were forgotten. The battle itself has long surpassed those things. In the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, they had already exchanged hundreds of blows. The hand that was plucking the zither was now struggling to withstand such intense magic. Zhang Chen glanced at Jiang Ruochen, then focused on a stronger attack, took a step back, and tried to buy himself a moment to rest. Jiang Ruochen's eyes lit up, found it. The halo behind him lit up again, an arrow was shot out, and at the same time, the long sword that had not been used at the beginning was drawn from its sheath with a whoosh. The light arrow shattered the sonic blade and continued shooting towards Zhang Chen. After resting for a while, Zhang Chen, whose hands had recovered, plucked the strings again. However, the power of the light arrow exceeded Zhang Chen's expectations, and the original sonic blade shattered upon contact. Zhang Chen's eyes widened in surprise, and he was about to gather his strength for an attack. The opponent, protected by the light arrow, also came within 10 meters of Zhang Chen. The girl's graceful figure floated in the air like a blooming white flower. As she turned her wrist, the sword reflected the sunlight, which was somewhat dazzling in Zhang Chen's eyes. Wanle, although the battle was not over yet, Mu Yungui had already made a final judgment on the outcome. Sword techniques were not written in the exquisite booklet left by the girl's master. However, as she Mayungui's disciple, Jiang Ruochen did not forget what her master had taught her. The girl on the stage kept swinging her long sword, aiming for Zhang Chen's vitals, but in her mind she was thinking, if master were present, would he praise Ruochen? Chapter 95 today is for them. What was originally a sparring match between spells quickly turned into a close-quarters battle after Jiang Ruochen approached with her long sword. Zhang Chen was covered in sweat and could only keep dodging. He plucked the strings of his zither again, and the sound blade slashed in front of him, but was blocked by the girl's magic. But no one blocked the long sword that was thrusting towards them. The situation has reversed, and now it's Zhang Chen's turn to be at a disadvantage. He has even less room to fight back than when his opponent was defeated earlier. Zhang Chen clenched his teeth, his brows furrowed, and his eyes flickered with hesitation and struggle. Finally, as if making an extremely difficult decision, his eyes became incredibly determined. Zhang Chen extended his right index finger and plucked a string from the zither. In an instant, a mysterious and powerful force began to flow at his fingertips, like a nimble snake. Immediately afterwards, a loud bang resounded, as deafening as a thunderclap from a clear sky. The extremely dangerous and violent power instantly surged out of the zither, transforming into a dazzling beam of light that shot straight toward Jiang Ruochen opposite her. Upon seeing this, a hint of astonishment flashed in the girl's beautiful eyes. She reacted extremely quickly, and a layer of dazzling light immediately emanated from her body, enveloping her entire form while she held her sword in front of her. However, even so, when that terrifying force struck the sword, he was hit hard and sent flying. It was like a giant rock falling into a calm lake, splashing up a huge spray of water tens of meters high. The spray spread rapidly in all directions with overwhelming force, bringing with it a howling gust of wind. At the same time, a cloud of smoke and dust erupted from the stage, billowing thick smoke obscuring the sky and instantly blurring the previously clear view. Even the spectators below felt the immense power of this magical wave. As the smoke and dust slowly dissipated, Zhang Chen stood there supporting his zither. Blood was seeping from his fingertips, dripping onto the ground one drop after another, while his arms seemed unable to be lifted. And that ancient zither with clouds and mist had one string broken. Jiang Ruochen, who was not far away, appeared on one side like a ghost. After regaining her balance and catching her breath slightly, she murmured softly. A moment later, a radiant goddess image appeared behind the girl, holding a sword of execution high in her hand. Zhang Chen looked up at the stunningly beautiful Dharma image modeled after the girl herself, his face grim. Is there an inexhaustible supply of spiritual energy? Divine punishment. As the girl finished speaking, a blinding light flashed from the Dharma image behind her, and a sword slashed out. Below the stage, Mu Yungui watched this seemingly evenly matched, yet actually utterly crushing, sparring match, and a thought stirred within him. The people on stage no longer need my protection. The magic and combat skills in the girl's hands were growing stronger within a time frame she was unaware of. With a single sword strike, even though Jiang Ruochen had reduced her strength somewhat, Zhang Chen was still in a sorry state. As a cultivator from Qin Valley, accustomed to a calm and collected approach to life, Zhang Chen had no intention of continuing the fight and could only offer sincere admiration. If you can't beat someone, you can't beat them. You don't have to be stubborn. Zhang Chen dusted off his sleeves and sighed. I admit defeat. My senior brother is very strong. I won by a narrow margin. If we encounter enemies in the future, as long as the opponent does not come within 100 meters of you, you will be invincible. Jiang Ruochen put away her worries and responded politely. As expected, I still have many shortcomings. I have learned a lot. Zhang Chen clasped his hands in a fist salute and calmly stepped down from the martial arts stage. In the past, if a girl still had energy at this time, she would ask if there was anyone else she wanted to spar with. However, this time, Zhang Chen, who was in the late stage of the Golden Core realm, had already been defeated. The girl, who had the thought of going back, turned around and prepared to leave. Just then, everyone thought it was over, when a figure laboriously climbed onto the martial arts stage, then stood up and dusted off his sleeves. I've heard that a junior sister named Jiang has arrived in Qin Valley. She's as beautiful as a goddess and has never been defeated. I wonder if I could have a friendly spar with you. Upon hearing the voice, the girl's mind went blank for a moment, and her steps slowly came to a halt. She simply lowered her head, not daring to turn around, and tightly gripped the scabbard of sorrow. But the longing had already become irresistible, and when I turned around, I saw the person coming. Mu Yunggui walked towards Jiang Ruochen, gazing tenderly at the girl who had once only reached his chest, but had now grown to be level with his shoulders. Mu Yunggui raised his right hand and gently touched Jiang Ruochen's slightly furrowed brows with his finger. It wasn't until the warmth reached between her eyebrows that the girl suddenly realized that none of this was just a dream or illusion. All the strength crumbled and shattered at that moment. The girl's lips twitched slightly, her expression unreadable, but a voice that seemed to tremble rang out. Ruochen admits defeat. The audience was completely stunned. That young man actually got so close to junior sister Jiang and even tapped her forehead. And junior sister Jiang, who had never lost before, actually admitted defeat. The crowd was momentarily confused, but by the time they came to their senses, the two had already vanished. From the small courtyard nestled on the mountainside, the sound of a young girl crying could be heard. Inside the room, Mu Yunggui was holding the girl in his arms and crying loudly, his clothes already soaked with tears. Mu Yunggui simply lowered his head, gently stroking the girl's back without saying a word. As the culprit, Mu Yunggui had no right to comfort her. He could only stay by the girl's side. I've grown up long ago, yet I always think I'm still fragile. The most immature one is actually oneself. Jiang Ruochen gripped Mu Yunggui's sleeve tightly, afraid that the person in front of her would disappear again. The girl cried for a long time. Two figures arrived one after the other in the courtyard. The commotion at the training ground earlier quickly reached the ears of the young valley master. When the newcomer arrived, all that could be heard was weeping. Ning Xianqi stopped the hand that was about to knock on the door. Ning Xianqi looked at Xai, shook his head, and said in his mind, "Let them have today." Xai nodded, then left quietly as if he had never been there. After crying for a long time, she didn't know if all the loneliness and longing in her heart had dissipated. But in any case, the girl raised her head. Mu Yunggui looked at the other person's red, swollen eyes and disheveled hair. At this moment, the phrase, "pear blossoms in the rain," became a concrete image. Mu Yunggui tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear and said softly, "I'm sorry." Jiang Ruochen gently raised her hand, pressed her index finger to Mu Yunggui's lips, and sobbed. "Master, please don't." Before Mu Yunggui could speak further, the girl murmured. Ruochen wasn't sad, but happy. Ruochen didn't lose the most important person again. Chapter 96, If Only It Were Like This. The snow outside began to melt, and the cold took a brief respite in this winter. Inside the room, the girl who had stopped sobbing still leaned against Mu Yunggui's chest. Looking at that cheek, Mu Yunggui's previous desire to pinch it vanished instantly. With the cuteness gone, Mu Yunggui didn't really want to make those gestures on that stunningly beautiful face. What is Master thinking? Does he not like Ruochen's appearance? Mu Yunggui was at a loss for words to explain to the person before him. As you grow up, you still need to maintain a certain level of self-control regarding distance. Tomorrow, Zhai and Ryu-chan need to teach each other some things to be mindful of in relationships between men and women. I just feel it's a bit of a pity that I couldn't watch Ryu-chan grow taller. By the way, tell Master how things are going in Chin Valley. Mu Yungui really wanted to ask about the Sword Sect, the Secret Realm, and the Shen family after he fell into a coma. Let's put it all aside for now. Jiang Ryu-chan leaned gently against Mu Yungui's shoulder and began to ramble on about the things she would tell him every day without getting tired of it. The firelight reflected in her clear eyes, and at that moment the girl's eyes seemed to have a light she had never seen before. Time slipped by unnoticed, and after a long while the sky outside the window finally darkened slowly, as if shrouded in a thick curtain. Immediately afterwards, the snowflakes began to fall from the sky. Beside the fireplace, Mu Yungui listened quietly as Jiang Ryu-chan recounted the events, big and small, that had occurred over the past year and a half. Although the girl was not wronged, Mu Yungui still felt a pang of sympathy for her for no reason. After listening, Mu Yungui touched the girl's hair. Then, as if remembering something, the girl said, "Master has been awake for a day and must be hungry. Ryu-chan, go and cook Master a bowl of porridge." Ryu-chan learned it specifically. After saying that, the girl got up and left. Mu Yungui then retrieved his spatial ring and changed into a familiar black robe. This thing is still the most comfortable. If I went out like that, I wonder what kind of rumors would spread. Mu Yungui rubbed his forehead and muttered to himself. Standing before the bronze mirror, Mu Yungui looked at his strangely white hair, a result of the constant destruction and rebuilding within his body. It's a bit of an eyesore. As Mu Yungui pondered, the girl brought out a bowl of white porridge. With a slightly puzzled look on her pretty face, she asked, "Master, do you want me to cut it off?" It's a bit too conspicuous." Upon hearing this, a hint of disappointment flashed across Ryu-chan's beautiful face. Mu Yungui glanced at his somewhat dejected disciple and tentatively asked, "Does Ryu-chan like Master's appearance right now?" Jiang Ryu-chan replied without hesitation, "No matter what Master looks like, Ryu-chan will love him." Mu Yungui asked with a questioning look, "So, I cut it." At this moment, a hint of disappointment flashed across the other party's face. Mu Yungui sighed and smiled. "Haha, Master suddenly thinks we should keep it. Actually, it looks quite nice." As soon as she finished speaking, the girl's mood changed again, and her eyes immediately lit up. "Okay, I guess I'll keep this long hair." Mu Yungui's eyes were full of affection. The girl looked at the bowl of white porridge she was holding and said, "By the way, this is a spiritual meal I made for my master." Mu Yungui looked at the bowl of white porridge in the girl's hand, which was emitting a captivating aroma, and reached out to take it. The girl hurriedly dodged, saying, "Master is currently very weak. Ryu-chan, please feed me." Mu Yungui was taken aback. "But I'm just physically weak and can't use my spiritual power for the time being. It's not that I can't even lift a bowl." At this moment, Jiang Ryu-chan seemed to be completely immersed in her own world, as if she could not hear Mu Yungui's explanation. She simply picked up the spoon gently and slowly scooped up a spoonful of the soup that exuded an enticing aroma. The girl lowered her head slightly and gently brushed the spoon across her lips to dissipate some of the heat. Then she carefully brought it to Mu Yungui's lips, her eyes full of expectation and concern. "Master Atilda," Mu Yungui thought to himself. As expected, Ryu-chan still retained that interest. Mu Yungui coughed and pretended to be serious. "Ryu-chan, are you not going to listen to your master?" The girl's pretty face showed an air of matter-of-fact compliment. "Master can't use his spiritual power right now and needs to be taken care of." Although it was for his own good, his little apprentice had already learned to talk back. The girl's eyes were earnest. "Master, will you be good?" Mu Yungui was stunned for a moment. "Isn't this my word?" The spoon, which had been placed in front of his mouth, remained there quietly, as if waiting for Mu Yungui to make a decision. Shaking his head helplessly, Mu Yungui finally obediently accepted the unexpected feeding. The fragrant white porridge seemed to possess a magical power, its delicate aroma of rice permeating the air. The moment the warm white porridge touched the tip of the tongue, a delicate and mellow flavor quickly spread throughout the mouth. "Delicious!" Mu Yungui couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. While praising the girl, he took the bowl from her while she was happy. "Ryu-chan hasn't bathed yet, has she? Go take a bath first, Tilda. Master can eat it himself." After a moment's thought, the girl realized that it was inappropriate to feed someone whose clothes were indeed covered in dust after a major battle, so she finally agreed. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Mu Yungui finished the bowl of white porridge in one gulp. After the girl finished bathing, Her fair, snow-white skin still faintly carried a trace of warmth, and water droplets remained on the strands of her beautiful hair. At this moment, Mu Yungui, already exhausted from a day of toil, yawned and lazily asked, "By the way, where is Ryuachin's room? You don't need to take care of me anymore." Having already evaporated the moisture with her spiritual energy, the tidy girl lay obediently on the bed in the blink of an eye, looking at Mu Yungui with some confusion. "I can't understand a word my master is saying. The bed is warmed up. Master, please rest early or you will catch a cold." Jiang Ryuachin lifted the covers and patted the side. Mu Yungui instantly snapped out of his drowsiness, which immediately vanished. "No, no, no, let me calm down." Mu Yungui pondered for a moment, unsure of where to begin his explanation. On the bed, those expectant eyes were looking at him. Upon careful consideration, it's clear that the family was so badly harmed by the Shen family. The girl was forced to wander from place to place around the age of 13. Her time with me was merely for training, and then she spent a year and a half in Chin Valley. Indeed, no one had ever taught the young girl these things. After a moment's thought, Mu Yungui still refused. Ryuachin, actually, as people grow up, they should pay attention to the differences between boys and girls. So, sleeping with master is actually not very appropriate. Upon hearing this, the girl pulled the blanket over her pouting lips and murmured, "Master, but for the past year and a half, Ryuachin has been sleeping with you, hasn't she? And there's only one bed." After the girl finished speaking, she seemed to have thought of something and looked at the sofa in the room. "Oh, Ryuachin understands." Mu Yungui, considering the girl's thoughts, refused. "No, Ryuachin, it's better if you don't understand." After some thought, Mu Yungui lay down, but unlike before when she would let the girl hold her, Mu Yungui turned her back to her. After Mu Yungui lay down and closed his eyes to rest, the girl beside him blushed instantly, her heart pounding rapidly. Master shouldn't have noticed anything amiss just now. The girl was slightly curled up, sensing the presence beside her. That strange feeling was simply hidden deep in his heart. That's all, just like that. It's a bit of a whim, I guess. A young girl doesn't ask for too much. Chapter 97. Let's have a hot pot. Mu Yungui opened her eyes, her fatigue had subsided, and she felt very comfortable in the bed. The person next to me had already gotten up. The girl, who had prepared breakfast, came over carrying a box of pastries. "The sky has cleared up." Mu Yungui slowly raised his head and looked out the window. Then the snow that was falling all over the sky stopped again. Mu Yungui narrowed his eyes slightly, a faint smile appearing on his lips, and said softly, "What happened yesterday might make Ryuachin even more eye-catching in Chin Valley." Junior sister Jiang, whom the disciples of Chin Valley described as being like a goddess, was crying and sobbing. As she spoke, Jiang Ryuachin involuntarily recalled the events of yesterday. Her beautiful, serene face remained expressionless. She simply shook her head gently and said slowly, "Ryuachin didn't really care what others thought of me." However, as soon as she finished speaking, she seemed to suddenly remember something. Her pretty face flushed slightly, and she lowered her head, her hands unconsciously fidgeting with the hem of her clothes, appearing somewhat shy, and murmured softly, "Ryuachin was happy yesterday. Master, please don't remember Ryuachin's ugly behavior." The girl cast a pleading look at Mu Yungui. Mu Yungui shook his head with a hint of smugness. After the little interlude ended, Mu Yungui had devoured the delicate pastry in a flash, then casually picked up a shawl and draped it lightly over his shoulders. "The weather's nice, shall we go out together?" Seeing this, Jiang Ryuachin immediately understood and quickly asked, "Is Master planning to go find Sister and the others?" Mu Yungui smiled and nodded in agreement. The young girl slowly extended her pair of fair, snow-white, slender, and delicate hands, her face blossoming into a gentle and captivating smile, as radiant as a spring flower in full bloom, and softly said, "Ryuachin will take Master there." After thinking for a moment, Mu Yungui finally gently took the girl's soft, boneless hand. Mu Yungui responded with a hint of gentleness that was barely perceptible. In front of an extremely tranquil courtyard, Mu Yungui looked up at the roof made of exquisitely stacked tiles. Chin Valley is indeed quite unique. The young valley master actually lives in such a place. Jiang Ryuachin then added, "Actually, according to Sister, there are still some magnificent and majestic buildings in Chin Valley. It's just that the valley master has gone to the northern border and has not yet returned. Brother Ning probably felt that those magnificent buildings were too empty and desolate, and that they would be abandoned if no one lived in them, so he moved here. Moreover, he abandoned all other affairs and dumped them all on the deputy valley master to handle." After hearing these words, Mu Yungui was at a loss for words. not knowing where to begin his rebuttal. Unlike other sects, the absence of a sect leader has no impact on Chin Valley as a whole. A clear male voice rang out from inside the courtyard. Ning Xianqi and Xai walked out from inside. Ning Xianqi was completely transformed. He had shaved off all the stubble that had made him look haggard and disheveled, and he seemed to have been reborn. At this moment, he was dressed in a light blue immortal robe, its hem fluttering in the wind, exuding an indescribable aura of otherworldly grace. Xai surprisingly changed out of her signature all-black dress today and put on a gorgeous blue and black gown instead. The dress was well-tailored, highlighting her dashing and heroic bearing. The meticulously embroidered gold trim on the hem of the skirt was like twinkling stars in the night sky, dazzling and eye-catching. Xai said softly, "Fellow Taoist Mu, it's been a long time. The young master and I have prepared a sumptuous feast. Why don't we go inside and chat some more?" Her voice was clear and melodious, like a nightingale singing in a valley. Looking at the two of them, Mu Yungui couldn't help but exclaim, "Fellow Taoist's attire is truly beautiful. Standing next to Brother Ning, they are a perfect match." Upon hearing this praise, Ning Xianqi couldn't help but smile smugly. However, just as he was about to get carried away with his pride, Xai merely glanced at him and then patted him on the back. Cough, cough. It's unclear how much effort Ning Xianqi used, but he coughed abruptly, quickly stopped smiling, gestured for Mu Yungui to enter the house, and led him inside. Ning Xianqi looked at Mu Yungui's striking white hair and said without thinking, "Brother Mu, you smell so good." Slap, the sound of a slap rang out again. Upon entering the house, the plum trees by the window were in an excellent position, blooming proudly against the wind and snow, swaying gently like moving paper flowers, a truly beautiful sight. Inside the room, a purple clay tea set was placed on an antique wooden table, and next to it was an extremely beautiful tea caddy, the tea inside of which must have been priceless. Several lifelike paintings hang on the wall, and the layout of the entire room is extremely pleasing to the eye. But something extremely discordant seemed to have appeared in the middle. Mu Yungui frowned and said, "Are we eating this stuff in this room?" "Zump." Ning Xianqi added some more broth to the scalding hot red oil. "I've always loved eating this. Don't you like it, Brother Mu? Eating this in winter is just so refreshing." As they were talking, Ning Xianqi's clothes were stained with oil splattered from the hot pot. Looking at the stained and smeared clothes, Mu Yungui couldn't help but feel a pang of regret and sighed. "It just feels a little strange to eat this stuff here." However, Ning Xianqi seemed not to hear, and instead quickly spotted a plate of bright red meat among the dazzling array of dishes on the table, and without hesitation put it into the pot. "I don't care about this or that. Let's eat first and then talk about it." The delicate incense in the room transformed into a different aroma as the soup gradually simmered, which, in a way, was also fragrant. Jiang Ryuchen looked at the hot pot in front of her and frowned slightly, saying, "Sister, this." Xai picked up a piece of meat, skillfully dipped it briefly in the boiling red oil, and as soon as it changed color, scooped it out, dipped it in the sauce in the small bowl in her hand, and put it into the girl's mouth. "I understand Ryuchen's concerns. This is the meat of spirit beasts from Chin Valley. It won't harm fellow Taoist Mu's health." Jiang Ryuchen chewed on the food in her mouth with her cherry-like lips, a satisfied look on her face, and mumbled, "Delicious." Xai looked at the person before him, and even that unchanging face showed a rare smile. The smile of the person before me is no longer a forced show of strength, but a genuine smile that blossoms from the heart. The four met, but the things that needed to be said were left unsaid. They just chatted about trivial things while rinsing the food in their bowls. Chapter 98, Those Things. Outside, the wind was biting cold, but inside it was warm and cozy. These two stunning beauties, usually as cold and aloof as icebergs, were now eating the popular delicacies of the southwest region without any restraint. Their cherry-like lips were now stained red and shiny with chili oil, as if they were painted with a layer of bright lip gloss. Looking at the table again, it was already a mess from eating. None of them used their spiritual power, and beads of sweat began to appear on their foreheads. The elegance and reserve that outsiders perceive have vanished without a trace, as if blown away by a gust of wind. In their place is a genuine and endearing foodie. Ning Xianqi scooped a steaming slice of meat from the pot and asked while eating, "Brother Mu, with your body in this state, are there any hidden dangers? When I arrived, there was indeed a moment when I thought you were already dead." Ning Xianqi still felt a chill when she recalled Mu Yungui's bloodied body and pierced abdomen. Compared to the other three, who had all reached the golden core stage and could instantly remove the spiciness, sensation as a form of pain with their spiritual energy if they so desired. Mu Yungui, who was purely resistant to spiciness, shook his head. No hidden dangers were left. On the contrary, this tribulation has polished the meridians and acupoints in my body. It's just that I may not be able to use spiritual power for a while, and my cultivation level has been put on hold. Mu Yungui spoke casually, his chopsticks never stopping. Ning Xianqi said, "Then Brother Mu, please stay in Qin Valley during this time. If there's anything you can't resolve, please let me know. Perhaps I can help." Mu Yungui nodded, then remembered something else and asked Ning Xianqi, "What about your side?" Ning Xianqi was stunned for a moment, then remembered what Mu Yungui had said, and then spoke something to Mu Yungui in his mind. Mu Yungui pondered for a moment, gave Ning Xianqi a reassuring look and nodded. Meanwhile, Zhai was still enthusiastically feeding Jiang Ruochen, whom he hadn't spent much time with in a long time, and he was having a great time doing so. After receiving confirmation from Mu Yungui, Ning Xianqi felt relieved. "By the way, although I don't know what your relationship is, what about that girl who was brought back to Qin Valley with you?" In one sentence, the conversation was brought back to the main topic. Mu Yungui had finished eating by this time. He put down his chopsticks and frowned. "That girl, I'll go see her tomorrow. Let me explain what's puzzling you all." Ning Xianqi also became serious, and with a wave of his sleeve, a barrier enveloped the small courtyard. Then Mu Yungui slowly recounted what happened in the secret realm. After hearing what Mu Yungui said, the two remained silent for a long time. When they finally came to their senses, Ning Xianqi looked on incredulously. "You weren't joking about killing people, were you? And it was actually the sect master and holy maiden of the Tai Xuan sword sect. If anyone else had said this, I wouldn't have believed such an absurd truth, but it was you, Brother Mu, who said it." Mu Yungui did not refute in much detail. "That girl. You should have noticed Giant 12's eyes long ago. Some things are right in front of you, even if they seem absurd, they are still the truth." Ning Xianqi and Zhai exchanged a glance, their eyes filled with confusion. Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen are both exceptionally talented and have unlimited potential. They are very likely to become one of the most powerful beings in the world in the future. However, at this very moment, they who are in the Qi refining and foundation establishment stages are actually plotting to ambush and kill the holy maiden from a famous and powerful sect in the eastern continent. And the saintess's father's cultivation level was high enough to instantly annihilate the two of them. If they could concentrate on their cultivation without distraction, perhaps in less than 50 years, or even just 20 or 30 years, they might have enough strength to directly attack the Tai Xuan sword sect and seek revenge. However, the two, who were about 2 years younger than each other, ultimately did not make this seemingly wiser choice. Mu Yungui isn't stupid, so if he chooses to do this, it can only be because he has no other choice. Jiang Ruochen lowered her eyes slightly, her long eyelashes obscuring the expression in her beautiful eyes, but her trembling hands betrayed her inner fear and unease. The girl said in a low, trembling voice, "That guy wanted my heart. Before I met my master, I had nothing left. If it weren't for my master saving me, The girl was somewhat agitated. As Jiang Ruochen spoke, the scenes of Sioux City, the blood-soaked night filled with firelight and sword shadows, and all the memories before she was 13 years old flashed back in her mind like a shattered mirror. Those pains and fears that I thought were buried deep in my heart are now surging back like a tidal wave." Mu Yungui stood quietly to the side, looking at the emotionally agitated girl in front of him, his heart filled with pity. He hadn't wanted to touch on Jiang Ruochen's painful past, fearing it would reopen her unhealed wounds. However, to his surprise, this strong young woman took the initiative to recount that unbearable experience. At this moment, Jiang Ruochen's condition was extremely unstable. Her body trembled slightly, and her eyes were sometimes confused and sometimes terrified, as if she were once again in that terrible bloody night. Her face, which had already healed, now looked somewhat pale from the pain of the memories. Seeing this, Mu Yungui gently took Jiang Ruochen's tightly clenched hand and looked into the girl's eyes, speaking softly. "Ruochen, look at me. I am here, aren't I?" Hearing Mu Yungui's voice, the girl, regaining her senses, loosened her clenched fist, grasped her hand with her master's, and raised her head, forcing a smile. I'm fine." After hearing Jiang Ruochen's words, Ning Xianqi and Zhai's faces instantly contorted with murderous intent. Zhai, in particular, who was usually calm and collected, now showed signs of unrest. "Young master." On the other side, Ning Xianqi looked troubled and said with concern, "This matter, You must know that the Tai Xuan sword sect's status in the eastern continent is comparable to that of our Qin Valley. If we rashly send high-level cultivators to kill them, it will probably be difficult to succeed. Ning Xianqi then explained. Moreover, the other party's identity is far too special, and the interests involved are intricately complex. If it were just someone from an obscure little sect, it would be easier to handle. But faced with such a thorny situation, even I, as the young Valley Master, dare not easily drag Qin Valley into it. Brother Mu, this. After saying that, he looked at Mu Yungui with deep regret. Mu Yungui shook his head. I didn't place my first hope on Qin Valley. If we really resolved it that way, many people would die. I'll find a way to settle these blood feuds myself. Ning Xianqi changed the subject and said, I haven't finished yet. Although I can't help as the young master of Qin Valley, I can as Brother Mu's friend. Mu Yungui said with gratitude, Thank you in advance, Brother Ning. However, we need to deal with other matters now, and revenge will require further planning. Then Mu Yungui gave him a complicated look. You don't actually have strange feelings for me, do you? Jiang Ruochen and Zhai, who were standing to the side, were taken aback. Ning Xianqi nodded seriously. Yes, I can say with absolute certainty that it is. Brother Mu is the most special person I have ever met. My intuition tells me that these friendships will become especially precious many years later. Of course, I'm not simply using Brother Mu. Before Ning Xianqi could finish speaking, Mu Yungui interrupted him. Do you remember when we talked about the Kunpeng on the ferry? Ning Xianqi was taken aback for a moment, then smiled meaningfully and nodded, saying, Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Apart from our business dealings, Brother Mu and I are actually friends. But I think the priority should definitely be our friendship. Listening to their conversation, Jiang Ruochen felt she couldn't quite understand the meaning behind the two boys' words. So, Zhai simply stopped thinking about it. However, her heart softened even more towards the girl she considered her younger sister. The boys poured themselves another cup of tea, clinked glasses, and drank as if they were drinking wine. Chapter 99, Plum Blossom. It was getting late, and the four of them walked out of the house chatting as they went. Ning Xianqi. So, how did Brother Mu know about my protector's existence when even I didn't know? Mu Yungui rolled her eyes at Ning Xianqi. You, the young master of a renowned sect in the eastern continent, left your own safe territory. Do you think you could secretly take Zhai and leave the sect? You may be underestimating Qin Gu. Of course, I still want to thank you. Even your protector, who tries to threaten you, will only intervene when things get extremely dangerous. Ning Xianqi shook his head, his expression indifferent. This is nothing. However, Mu Yungui shook his head, his face turned serious. He patted the snow off his shoulder and solemnly bowed to Ning Xianqi. Mu Yungui thanks Brother Ning for his help once again. Ning Xianqi also became more formal and returned the greeting in the same serious manner. After the conversation ended, the things that Ning Xianqi and Zhai had been puzzled about in the secret realm became reasonable under Mu Yungui's explanation. However, to avoid unnecessary trouble, Mu Yungui did not reveal the story of Ruochen's rebirth, her brief demonic possession, and her obsession. Ning Xianqi and Zhai were both amazed by the calm words spoken by him, realizing the immense danger involved. It was getting late, and Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen prepared to leave. Remembering what happened last night, Mu Yungui suddenly stopped and said to Zhai that they should talk alone. Zhai was a little curious but did not refuse. Ruochen and Ning Xianqi were left looking at each other in bewilderment. Afterwards, Mu Yungui and Zhai went to the side and whispered a few words to each other. Mu Yungui's face first showed disbelief, then he sighed, looking dejected. He said thank you and left with Jiang Ruochen. A crane delivering a child. Doesn't Qin Valley have any female cultivators who are even remotely normal? Mu Yungui recalled Zhai's innocent words just now and sighed. Ruochen followed behind, without using any spiritual power or speaking. The two walked up the mountain in the dim light. In a short while, the two reached the top of the mountain. Mu Yungui exhaled a breath of white air, turned around and looked at the lights of the other Qin Valley cultivators' residences in the distance, which resembled a starry sky. Qin Valley is like a town. The young apprentice behind him kept his head down, and the two did not exchange a word. When they reached the courtyard, the girl suddenly hugged Mu Yungui from behind. Mu Yungui stopped and felt the touch on his back. Before he could ask, the girl behind him, her head resting against his back, whispered, "Master, I'm a little scared. I don't want revenge anymore." Upon hearing what Jiang Ruochen said, Mu Yungui froze on the spot. The usually obedient and sensible apprentice's words now carried an inexplicable air of willfulness, and even a hint of calm. Of course, if the girl truly lets go of her hatred, Mu Yungui won't say anything. But that's definitely not the case right now. The girl was beginning to fear that her master would recover from his injuries, and then try to assassinate him. Shall we stay in Chin Valley? With just a few words, the girl seemed to have used up all her strength. A somewhat weary voice rang out again. I've already lost the most important person in my life, and I don't want to lose them again. Mu Yungui's heart tightened, and a bitter feeling welled up inside him, but he did not show it to the girl. Master actually values his life quite a bit, so he'll be fine. Didn't Brother Ning just say that the Tai Xuan sword sect and the Sha Ling sect are preparing for a great war? The sword sect has already closed its mountain, and Shen Ling Xiao has also gone into seclusion. Shen Qinghan's potential is limited to the 7th grade Golden Core stage, and he is also missing an eye. It seems that if he has the opportunity to face someone of the same realm, it won't be so difficult. Once Master recovers his strength, he will surely be able to cut off her head. But judging from their appearance, they won't even have a chance to come and find them. Mu Yungui said a lot, but he did not directly answer the girl's question. After a moment of silence behind me, a voice said, Mu Yungui lowered his eyes. Go back and rest early. I'll go see that guy tomorrow. A plum blossom fell from the plum tree in the courtyard that had bloomed early, and the wind blew it to the girl's side. The girl, with shackles gleaming with golden light fastened to her ankles, stood there blankly. The eyes noticed the flower. A pair of eyes of different colors were open, no longer relying on other senses or spiritual power, but concentrating entirely on using their own vision to guide their hand movements. After crouching down, I slowly followed my gaze toward the plum blossoms lying quietly in the pristine white snow. The movements appeared awkward and clumsy on a 17 or 18-year-old girl, just like a newborn baby. Chapter 100, Reflection. In her dream, Giant 12 dreamt of that scene again, the dead Giant Jiu and Shen Qinghan, whose whereabouts were unknown. Fragments flashed through her mind, causing pain in the girl's head, and she woke up. A drop of heavenly essence liquid repaired the girl's severely damaged qi, which had been forcibly infused with spiritual energy. The girl, who had long been prepared to die in battle, was rescued by someone from an unknown source, and life felt somewhat disorienting to her. The girl had actually tried to commit suicide, but the guy stopped her each time. After so much time had passed, the idea had faded considerably. In short, she hadn't tried any more methods of suicide. The girl who always gets up before dawn overslept today. The white snow outside the window reflected the light, making one eye feel somewhat blinded, so the girl habitually covered it with a black veil. The only person who will come to this cage, where she is imprisoned, is the girl who shares the same aura as the saintess. No one else will come. Unable to use her spiritual power, she simply sat on the doorframe in a daze every day. Perhaps because he couldn't cultivate and had no purpose, Giant 12 realized that he had much more to do than he had thought before. Suicide Squad members don't need to think. But why did Giant Jiu, who clearly didn't need to die in the secret realm? Even though Giant Jiu is dead, the Holy Maiden doesn't seem to care at all. And the strangest thing is, how did the Saintess's eyes end up on my body? The girl shook her head. She never found a solution to these thoughts, so she simply stopped thinking about them and muttered to herself, "This isn't yours." This day seemed a little different, because some noisy sounds came from outside the courtyard. Master Ryuachin usually just controls her. She doesn't hurt her or anything. If she's talking nonsense, don't believe her. The girl's voice outside the courtyard sounded somewhat flustered. Ryuachin didn't go astray. That person was usually cold and calm, but now she was speaking in such a soft and delicate tone. Giant 12 in the courtyard frowned slightly when he heard this. Look, she's perfectly fine. The courtyard gate was pushed open by Jiang Ryuachin, whose face was filled with worry. The person arrived, but there was another person beside him. Giant 12 sensed the other person's aura. He was just a mortal, but he felt a sense of familiarity. Then he remembered that when he was on the verge of death, it seemed that he was the one who saved him. Those leg irons were put on to prevent her from doing anything reckless. Ryuachin didn't hurt her. Mu Yungui smiled gently. I didn't blame Ryuachin, so there's no need to be so nervous. Jiang Ryuachin was uncertain. She glanced at Giant 12, whom she had once complained about, from behind Mu Yungui and said timidly, I'm afraid she'll say something inappropriate. What if Master dislikes me? Thinking of this, Jiang Ryuachin became even more worried. Mu Yungui ignored his little apprentice's unfounded worries. He stepped forward and carefully examined Giant 12, who had recovered quite well, and breathed a sigh of relief. Because Ryuachin acted like a child who had done something wrong, making excuses along the way. He thought his apprentice had done something strange to Shen Qinghan's so-called Death Warrior. At least on the surface, there doesn't seem to be a problem. Mu Yungui said slowly, "You endured so much pain, your soul was torn apart and your body was severely injured. That's amazing. And you seem to be recovering quite well." Sword 12's emotionless voice rang out, "Did you save me?" Mu Yungui smiled and said, "That's right, it's me, but you've surprised me a bit." Sword 12 remained expressionless. "Why?" Mu Yungui walked forward and squatted down beside the girl, reaching out to remove the black veil, and smiled with narrowed eyes. "Because I thought you would try to provoke me the moment we met, so that I would kill you, or maybe you would try to kill me. However, it seems that you have figured some things out in the past year or so." A face no less beautiful than Jiang Ryuachin's was revealed. However, from a distance, this stunningly beautiful girl appeared rather dazed. Over the course of a year and a half, the girl began to resist, became angry, begged for mercy, and became indifferent in response to the act of tearing off her black veil. Eventually, she learned to accept it, which is why she appears somewhat calm at this moment. The two stared at each other silently, as if time had frozen at that moment. The girl, who was not yet fully proficient in using her visual abilities, stared at the boy in front of her with a slightly confused look in her eyes. Then she slowly raised her slender arm, her movements somewhat clumsy and hesitant. Her small hand trembled slightly in the air, as if trying to find its target. Finally, her fingers gently touched Mu Yungui's face. However, because her senses were not yet fully clear, she had to rely on her hands to feel the person in front of her. She carefully moved her fingertips, starting from her forehead, slowly gliding over her straight nose, and then to the slightly upturned corners of her mouth. She meticulously explored every subtle detail. Jiang Ryuachin, who was standing to the side, witnessed this scene. Her expression instantly became extremely complicated, a mixture of surprise, panic, and a hint of barely perceptible shyness. "No, no, master." Jiang Ryuachin's voice trembled slightly with nervousness. Her gaze was fixed on the spot where the girl and Mu Yungui were in contact, and a strange anxiety and unease welled up in her heart. Mu Yungui stopped his young apprentice with a shove. Let her continue. Whether Jian Shir's actions were intentional or not, he was accepting the reality of what his eyes had revealed. Mu Yungui could not let these opportunities slip by. Jian 12 cupped Mu Yungui's face in his hands, trying his best to get closer to see the person in front of him more clearly. Jiang Ryuachin, who was standing to the side, witnessed this scene and was extremely anxious. She wished she could rush forward immediately to stop Jian Shir's bold and audacious behavior. However, they couldn't disrupt their master's plans, so they could only watch helplessly as things unfolded. So the girl puffed out her cheeks, secretly angry. The distance between the two was getting closer and closer. Jiang Ryuachin secretly channeled her magic, preparing to defy the imperial decree and intervene, but Jian 12 stopped instead. "If you get too close, you won't be able to see clearly," Mu Yungui said with satisfaction. "Very good, it seems you have accepted your eyes." Then he added, "You asked me why I saved you just now. It's because you're not a member of the Shen family's death squad. You are a very important person, but now you are more of a bargaining chip for me. I will use you to exchange for something. I'm going to use you to get someone else to do the job. That person is a madwoman and also your mother." Jian 12 looked at Mu Yungui with a bewildered expression, unable to comprehend this unfamiliar word. "What is mother?" Mu Yungui simply gazed at her silently, without giving a direct answer, because he knew very well that for someone like Jian 12, who had been raised as a suicide soldier since childhood, it was an extremely difficult thing to make him understand what emotions and love were. These things are too distant and abstract for them, and even if you try your best to explain them, it will be in vain. Mu Yungui, recalling the scenes from the previous secret realm, asked curiously, "When I arrived at the battlefield where Shen Qinghan and Zhang Kuang were fighting, I saw you unconscious with pain on your face. I don't think you, as someone trained in the dark sword of the sword sect, would be afraid of pain. So it's because you feel guilty and remorseful for failing to help Shen Qinghan? Or is it because Jian Jiu's death makes you feel uneasy?" When Jian Jiu was mentioned, Jian Shir's expression changed slightly. Mu Yungui felt certain. Indeed, even the most ruthless person, as long as they still possess emotions, cannot become a machine. Recalling her memories of her past life, although she hadn't interacted with him, both Jian Jiu and the Jian 12 before her had appeared together. It is often this very special identity, that makes it easier to give rise to some strange and elusive emotions. Therefore, Mu Yungui secretly realized that the seemingly emotionless girl before him and Jian Jiu actually shared a bond similar to that between a father and daughter, or a brother and sister. In that case, Mu Yungui could explain, then mother is probably a woman, an older one, a more powerful and reliable Jian Jiu. Jian 12 lowered his head, lost in thought. Whenever he thought of Jian 9, a strange emotion welled up within him. Does such a person exist? Mu Yungui replied, yes. Chapter 101, Gujiu. In the small courtyard, which was even smaller than the one where the two lived, the boy was half squatting at the doorway, while the girl sat on the door frame. Of course, there was also a girl with her arms crossed, stomping her feet as if she was sulking. Although normally only those sword cultivators who successfully overcome the heavenly tribulation and enter the tribulation transcending stage can obtain the supreme title of Sword Immortal, the current era is a long and silent period. It is like the darkness before dawn, a silent wait before a glorious and splendid era arrives. This is why cultivators at the tribulation transcending stage have become extremely rare, like phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Consequently, many cultivators on the mountain whose cultivation has reached the nascent soul stage or above have begun to be called sword immortals. Decades ago in the central continent, there once appeared a pair of sword cultivators from the Wanli Sword Pavilion. They were both exceptionally talented and outstanding, truly dragons among men. What is astonishing is that, after only a few hundred years of honing their skills, they both reached the peak of the nascent soul realm. Therefore, the cultivators of the central continent called them the immortal couple. These two individuals not only possessed unparalleled, masterful swordsmanship, but also displayed remarkable synergy and perfect understanding when fighting side by side. Their swordplay complemented and reinforced each other, resulting in seamless coordination. Thanks to this extraordinary swordsmanship and unwavering teamwork, they were even able to defeat enemies of higher cultivation levels. However, despite the seemingly beautiful story, the two share a common trait. They both hate evil as if it were their enemy, especially those ghost cultivators who are refined from living people. No matter how low or high their cultivation level is, as long as they discover them, they will mercilessly slash and kill them with their swords. In this way, thousands of ghost cultivators have died at their hands. In an instant, the southern frontier, which was occupied by ghost cultivators, became a thorn in everyone's side, and even the other cultivators of the Wanli Sword Pavilion could not set foot in the southern frontier, which was full of both opportunities and dangers. As a result, these two sword cultivators with extraordinary killing power even became a burden to Wanli Sword Pavilion, and the sect once severed ties with them. But Mu Yungui paused deliberately before continuing. If nothing unexpected happens, something unexpected should have happened by now. There's always fighting in the mountains. It's very complicated. Until one day, the woman became pregnant and wanted to retire from the world of cultivators. How difficult it is for two people who have made too many enemies to stay away from the conflict. At that time, they were not in their own sect's territory. What's worse, after the woman in this immortal couple became pregnant, the news was somehow leaked out. After that, the husband took his wife back to his sect to seek protection, hoping that his wife could safely give birth to the child in her womb. At that time, there were tens of millions of ghost cultivators in the southern frontier. The husband stood in front of his wife, his sword never sheathed, and he returned to the central continent under the siege of countless enemies. In short, they gave birth to a baby girl. It is said that when the girl was born, there were strange celestial phenomena, and she possessed extremely extraordinary talents. But the husband was attacked and killed by his enemies while trying to protect the mother and daughter behind him. Jiang Ryuchen, standing to the side, frowned deeply. Her beautiful face was flushed with anger, her heart filled with resentment towards the fate of the immortal couple in the story her master had told her. How could that sect called Wanli Sword Pavilion do this? They were clearly upholding justice and doing the right thing. But why, when they needed support the most, not a single person stood up for them? The girl's voice trembled slightly, as if she could feel the helplessness and despair of the immortal couple at that time. Mu Yungui sighed softly, a hint of reminiscence flickering in his deep eyes. The main reason for this is that the vast majority of their enemies come from the southern frontier, and the southern frontier is no ordinary place. It is extremely complex and completely different from the ordinary cultivators we usually encounter who cultivate by refining spiritual energy. At this point, Mu Yungui paused slightly, as if organizing his thoughts. Then he continued to explain. The people of the southern frontier rely on power refined from the life force of various creatures. This unique cultivation method not only fascinates them, but also secretly attracts the interest of other forces. Despite numerous concerns and helplessness, the Wanli sword sect could only manage to save the woman when they finally intervened, while the infant in her arms remained missing. Of course, if you ask me, a sect that can't even protect its own disciples is utterly worthless. Thinking of these things, Mu Yonghui felt inexplicably angry. After the woman was rescued and brought back to the sect, her husband died in battle, her daughter disappeared, and she went mad not long after. The Wanli sword sect felt a pang of guilt and buried what they considered a shameful matter in the back mountains. By the way, that woman's name was Gu Huanian, and the baby was named Gu Jiu after he was born. At this point, Mu Yonghui stopped, staring at Jian 12 without saying a word. Jian Shear also looked at Mu Yonghui, expressionless. After a long while, Mu Yonghui finally couldn't hold back any longer. So, aren't you going to guess who you really are? Upon hearing Mu Yonghui's question, Jian 12 replied softly, I am Jian 12. Upon hearing what Jian 12 said, Mu Yonghui staggered, lost his balance, and his face turned ugly. So, after all that I said, you didn't listen to a thing. You're Gu Jiu, the baby who was stolen by that old scoundrel for some reason. You think you're so great by staying by Shen Qinghen's side. It's just that after the Holy Eye was taken away, she needed the original owner to be by her side so that she could slowly adapt. Otherwise, why would he have never used the Holy Eye even after more than 10 years of awakening, and only dared to activate the Eye technique after reaching the Golden Core stage? Jian Shear looked up at Mu Yonghui, who seemed somewhat anxious, but made no move. By the way, you were trained to be an assassin from a young age, and you even had your soul pulled out and lit by a ghost lamp before, so it's normal that your mind isn't very sharp. Looking at the silent girl who couldn't be hit, scolded, scared, or coaxed, Mu Yonghui wiped his face, feeling somewhat helpless. Mu then seemed to have thought of something, held up a finger and said with delight, Hey, I have an idea. Mu Yonghui Sigma. Letter FF9F, letter FF89, letter FF89. Jiang Ryuachin. Sword 12 degrees Japanese letter degrees. Mu Yonghui took out a candy from his pocket, handed it to Jian 12 and grinned mischievously. Don't ask, just open your mouth. The girl, accustomed to commands, did not resist and opened her mouth. Mu Yonghui took off the candy wrapper and fed it to the girl. A flavor I'd never experienced before burst forth on my tongue and taste buds. It was the first time Jian 12 had tasted this flavor, and I didn't dislike it. Mu Yonghui nodded, quite satisfied, and then uttered some extremely strange-sounding words from his smiling mouth. Heh, before I fully recover from my injuries, I'll give you a good lesson. To fall from machine to human isn't that simple. Having said that, Mu Yonghui turned around gracefully and slightly raised his hand, gesturing to Jiang Ryuachin. Ryuachin, take Gu Jiu back to our lodgings. I've already checked, and there's a side room where we're currently staying. I'll sleep there. As for you, you can rest with her from now on. In this way, it can be said to kill two birds with one stone, or even be called a perfect three-way solution. The more Mu Yonghui thought about it, the more pleased he became, and he couldn't help but admire himself in his heart. However, when these words reached the ears of a certain young girl, they were like a bolt from the blue. Jiang Ryuachin looked pitiful and couldn't help but shout, Master. Then, seemingly realizing she had lost her composure, she composed herself, looked pitiful, and gently tapped Gu Jiu beside her with her finger, murmuring, Does Master like women like her? As she spoke, her voice began to tremble slightly, as if she were about to cry at any moment. If Ryuachin can learn to become like that in the future, her words were full of grievance. Mu Yonghui was a little confused. Wasn't he just trying to bring out the feelings that Gu Jiu had suppressed deep in her heart? Saving these innocent people is like the sky is falling. Even Gu Jiu, who had been expressionless, slightly widened her golden eyes, appearing to show some emotional fluctuation. Although Mu Yonghui didn't even know what he had done wrong. But it's time to appease my little apprentice. Chapter 102, Someone's Angry. In the early morning courtyard, Mu Yonghui changed into a black robe, while Jiang Ryuachin, standing beside him, wore her usual simple white dress. Inside that side room, a young girl was still asleep. Last night, Mu Yonghui brought Jian Shear, who should be named Gu Jiu, back to his courtyard, but his own disciple still slept with him. A night has passed, and it seems someone is still breathing. Mu Yonghui's hands were actually a little cold, but he still gently rubbed the girl's no longer soft and chubby face. Mu Yonghui initially felt that such behavior was inappropriate given her exquisitely sculpted face. but no matter what kind of expression it is, it can be on a girl's face. However, Mu Yungui subconsciously felt that it would be best if this face were like a painting for the world to admire. He had already recalled his past life, during which he had done everything over hundreds of years, but he had never learned how to coax children. So all I can do right now is rub and hug. No, 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 Mu Yungui dismissed the absurd thought from his mind, shook his head, and said apologetically, "Actually, she's quite pitiful too. They're both innocent. My super cute and gentle little apprentice shouldn't bother arguing with that blockhead, right?" A string of compliments, though perhaps not entirely sincere, still made Jiang Ruochen blush slightly. The girl nodded, and Mu Yungui asked again, "Are you still angry?" Jiang Ruochen frowned slightly and glanced to the side. "No, that's not it." Mu Yungui, quick-witted, suggested, "Then Master shouldn't bother with Gu Jiu. How about Ruochen takes Master on a tour of Qin Valley, just the two of us?" After asking, she gracefully extended a hand. After hesitating for a moment, the girl placed her hand on it and said, "MMM." Compared to other cultivation sects, Qin Valley has always given people an impression of being otherworldly. Normally, unless other sects come to request assistance, the disciples of Qin Valley will choose to cultivate in seclusion until they reach the nascent soul stage before they may voluntarily leave the valley to go down the mountain for training. Some disciples even stayed in the mountains, devoting themselves to studying higher realms and the art of music. This was quite common, but Jiang Chen's case was an extremely rare exception. However, things have been quite lively lately, with discussions arising from the undefeated junior sister Jiang and the white-haired man at the martial arts arena a few days ago. Qin Valley is very large, with a lake lying quietly there, which is a kilometer wide. Many different kinds of trees are planted around the lake, and pavilions and towers stand around the lake in a well-organized manner. To better enjoy the lake view, Qin Valley even built several unique pavilions in the middle of the lake. If it were spring or autumn, the scenery here would be absolutely stunning. A gentle spring breeze stirs the willow branches, which sway gracefully like green silk ribbons. Spring flowers bloom in profusion, vying for attention, reflecting in the clear lake water to create a picturesque scene. However, it was the dead of winter, and the lake was already covered by a thick layer of ice, resembling a giant silver mirror. The surrounding world was also a blanket of white, with trees draped in pristine white attire and the earth covered as if by a soft velvet carpet. Although the snow scene was quite beautiful, there were very few cultivators in Qin Valley due to the severe cold. "Does Ruochen often come out for walks in Qin Valley?" Mu Yungui asked. The two chatted, and after walking around for a while after coming down the mountain, the girl's mood improved a lot. She was always happier when it was just her and her master. Thinking of Gu Jiu, whom she neither disliked nor particularly liked, still sleeping, the girl felt a little happier. "Sister Xai brought Ruochen to these places before, but we haven't been here much since. When Master was asleep, I was always focused on my cultivation in the room." At this point, Mu Yungui reminded him, "Take a walk during breaks in your regular training, and don't keep that tension up all the time. Take a break during this time and don't focus all your attention on cultivation." Xai also reminded me that Ryu-chan, your cultivation level seems to be improving too quickly. The girl patted her chest confidently and said, "Ruochen is fine." The two talked about the scenery of Qin Valley and then left Bihu Lake. A large number of people appeared in the distance, curiously observing the two and whispering among themselves. Mu Yungui looked over and saw a man and a woman walking towards them. One of them was a familiar face. Xiao Qingge and Qinwan walked towards the two of them with some trepidation. Xiao Qingge glanced at Jiang Ruochen beside her, then at the senior brothers and sisters in the distance behind her who were pretending to be nonchalant, and felt a headache coming on. "Junior sister Jiang," Qinwan greeted. Jiang Ruochen nodded. "Hello, senior sister Qin." "Junior brother Mu, what a coincidence to meet you here." Xiao Qingge scratched the back of his head and smiled awkwardly. To be honest, he and Mu Yungui weren't actually that familiar with each other. They had only talked once. As soon as Xiao Qingge finished speaking, Jiang Ruochen, who had been looking docile, instantly became alert, revealing her icy and unapproachable demeanor. The snow had stopped long ago, but Xiao Qingge felt a bit colder. Qinwan, standing nearby, also sensed that her junior sister, who had been somewhat amiable just moments before, seemed to have suddenly become angry. Qinggu is socially awkward, but eating melons is in his nature. "Senior brother Xiao," Mu Yungui greeted him, then smiled slightly as he recalled the events of that day. "By the way, what was the result of the bet that day? Ruochen conceded defeat, so there was no winner." Zio King, this is actually the first time everyone has seen junior sister Jiang lose. If she had lost after a friendly spar, it would have been fine, but now it seems like they're still discussing whether it was a fixed match and demanding a refund. No, that's not important. Zio King shook her head and asked about the purpose of her visit. Actually, I wanted to ask junior brother Mew about what happened that day. My senior brothers and sisters have been curious and nagging me about it for days, wanting me to ask them. You and junior sister Jiang have known each other for a long time, haven't you? After saying that, Zio King regretted it a little. The two people in front of her were walking together. How could she not recognize them? The onlookers in Chin Valley were more curious about the relationship between the two, since it was the first time they had seen Jiang Shaimai with any other expression on her face. It's like an iron tree blooming. Sure enough, Zio King felt the temperature around him getting colder and colder, and the gaze fixed on him had a scrutinizing quality, making him feel quite uncomfortable. Wan, standing to the side, could barely maintain her smile. Zio King directly asked these somewhat private questions, and as expected, junior sister Jiang got angry. Mu Yungui didn't seem to care and nodded, saying, "Yes, Ryuachin and I have known each other for a long time, so the bet at that time shouldn't be considered a loss for Ryuachin." Then Mu Yungui sighed, gently pinched the girl's cheek, and a muffled voice came from the girl's mouth. Master C. Tilda. In their murmured conversation, Wan and Zio King couldn't understand what junior sister Jiang had said. Mu Yungui gently advised, "Ryuachin, don't always frown like that. You can actually make more friends in Chin Valley." Jiang Ryuachin said aggrievedly, "But he calls you junior brother Mu." Mu Yungui, "Maybe it's because I look younger." Not far away, Zio King and Wan stared wide-eyed at Mu Yungui's actions in astonishment. They saw that the usually aloof and unapproachable junior sister Jiang had her flawless face casually pinched by Mu Yungui. After being pinched, a hint of grievance appeared on Jiang Shaimai's beautiful face, which was originally expressionless. She frowned slightly, pursed her lips, and looked apologetic. Looking at Jiang Shaimai's current appearance, Wan suddenly felt a strange sensation. Jiang Shaimai looked exactly like a pitiful little animal. The moment this thought popped into her head, Wan was startled. She immediately shook her head, afraid that she might accidentally utter the thought aloud. However, despite her reservations, Wan couldn't help but secretly exclaim, "Junior sister Jiang, who doesn't follow the aloof route, can be so cute and charming. I've never seen junior sister Jiang like this before." Mu Yungui explained, "That day was just a joke between Ryuachin and me. I didn't use any strange moves again. Of course, normally speaking, my chances of winning are still very high." Mu Yungui pondered, glanced at the girl of destiny beside him who possessed a divine heart, extraordinary talent, and extreme diligence, and then said, "Should." Chapter 103, That's Just What You Think. The next day, Mu Yungui took the two children to find Ning Xianqi again. There was nothing major happening in Chin Valley, but as the young master's maid, Xai was always very busy. Besides her cultivation, she was responsible for Ning Xianqi's food, clothing, and shelter. However, Xai wasn't that busy today. On the contrary, today was a kind of reward, wasn't it? He gently reached out and tenderly stroked Jiang Ryuachin's silky, smooth hair, which was resting on his thigh. A delicate touch came from my fingertips, as if I were touching the softest silk. As Jiang Ryuachin grew older, it had been a long time since she had been so close to him. However, at this moment, Jiang Ryuachin was not the only one who attracted Xai's attention. Gu Jiu, sitting blankly in front of me, was like a delicate doll, sitting quietly and motionless. Only her bright and dazzling eyes would occasionally dart around, revealing a hint of liveliness. The table beside him was filled with all sorts of magical fruits. These magical fruits exude an enticing aroma and have a vibrant color, making them incredibly tempting. Xai picked up a vibrant green fruit, as if carved from jade with great interest, and slowly brought it to Gu Jiu's lips. "Miss Gu, would you like some?" Gu Jiu, who didn't quite know how to refuse, took it as an order and didn't refuse. Moreover, it was a taste I'd never had before, quite unique. Seeing this, Xai felt satisfied. We were very curious about her before, but at first we thought she was blind and mute. Standing beside Mu Yungui, Ning Xianqi recalled what happened a year ago. Back then, I was wondering, how could such a beautiful girl be mute? At this moment, everyone's eyes were on her, but Gu Jiu was neither panicked nor afraid. There were just too many things in front of her, and she couldn't keep up with them all. "Ryuachin, you and Misk should rest here for a while today." Afterwards, Mu Yungui carefully gave his obedient and adorable little apprentice several instructions. After giving his instructions, Mu Yungui nodded in relief and turned to leave with Ning Xianqi beside him. After turning down several seemingly ordinary but actually treacherous alleyways, we finally stopped in an inconspicuous corner. The cottage was abandoned, with a dilapidated door that seemed to have been forgotten by time. Ning Xian stood up, took a deep breath, and mysterious runes flowed from his fingertips, pointing towards the door. With a soft click, the previously closed door slowly opened, revealing a passage hidden behind the array. Without hesitation, the two stepped into the passage. As soon as they entered, the door behind them closed automatically, shutting out all the noise from the outside world. As you continue along this dark and deep passage, the ground beneath your feet gradually slopes downwards, forming a long staircase that seems to have no end in sight. Along the walls on both sides, candles were lit at intervals, their faint light flickering in the darkness, barely illuminating the path ahead. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the silent passageway, making a crisp tap-tap sound. Ning Xianqi had just started to tease. Brother Mu is surrounded by extraordinary people. That girl's talent is actually quite strong as well. Mu Yungui became increasingly speechless as he listened, then elbowed Ning Xianqi beside him. You have the nerve to say that. Last time I was planning to have Zhai tell Ryu-chan some things about relationships between men and women, but I didn't expect Misk to say something like, a bird that brings children. What kind of things do you teach in Chin Valley? You don't seem like normal people at all. Then I remembered the girl who came to say hello yesterday and left without explanation. I think her name was Qin Wan. It also felt a bit strange. Ning Xianqi. Then Brother Mu must think that Miss Jiang is completely ignorant about matters between men and women. Wai Wei can tell that Miss Jiang has strong feelings for Brother Mu. Mu Yungui pondered. That was probably just a feeling of dependence that arose because I appeared when she was in despair. I actually want to let Ryuachin live a normal life after I get my revenge. At that time, she will have the opportunity to choose. She will experience normal love, normal. Before Mu Yungui could finish speaking, Ning Xianqi abruptly interrupted. Is that just what Brother Mu thinks? The two stopped and fell silent. What if Miss Jiang really does like Brother Mu? Romance between master and disciple is not a strange thing. It was Brother Mu who was running away from everything from beginning to end. Mu Yungui was stunned for a moment. It seemed like he'd hit a nerve. Anyway, that's what he was thinking, Mu Yungui pondered. What if junior sister Jiang doesn't actually have a dependence on you, but truly likes Brother Mu? Perhaps one day she'll bravely confess to Brother Mu. What would Brother Mu do then? Mu Yungui looked at the flickering candlelight. I'll have my own answer by then. Ning Xianqi glanced at Mu Yungui beside him. It was the first time he had ever seen his brother Mu with such an expression. Even someone who has always been incredibly calm and collected has experienced a brief period of confusion. Ning Xianqi did not delve further into these private matters. Feelings are always the most complicated thing. Who can truly understand them? Look, the book says that the immortals are all without desires and without any extra emotions. Could it be said that even immortals are afraid of this thing? Perhaps the real immortals are afraid of emotions. A series of seemingly treasonous words flowed from Ning Xianqi's mouth. Mu Yungui rubbed his face, putting aside the troubles that were yet to come, and looked at Ning Xianqi, who seemed somewhat smug. Every family has its own troubles, so Mu Yungui decided to address the other family's problems. And what about you and Xai? Ning Xianqi nearly tripped when the topic suddenly turned to him. Why is it my turn again? Childhood sweetheart's a perfect match. If we disregard your social status, you two are absolutely a match made in heaven. But in fact, you two are a match made in heaven, and your hearts have long been connected. Mu Yungui didn't even explain to Ning Xianqi the relationship between them. Or rather, there was no need to explain it at all. So, Brother Ning, if there's something you want to do, I suggest you don't hesitate and don't give up. After saying that, the two walked through the dark passageway and stopped in front of a door. Ning Xian grasped the doorknob. Isn't this what I'm doing? Before he finished speaking, he firmly opened the door, revealing a brightly lit room. After finishing his conversation with others, Mu Yungui slowly turned his gaze to the numerous interconnected and flowing formations before him. These formations were intricate and shimmering. His gaze gradually fell upon the rare and precious treasures displayed on the table. These treasures were dazzling, each exuding a unique aura. The boundary origin glass among them was particularly eye-catching. It was as crystal clear as celestial jade, exhibiting a near-perfect transparency. It floated quietly above an array, like the most dazzling star in the night sky. Upon closer inspection, one can discover countless fine, hair-like golden lines flowing continuously within the gemstone. These golden lines, like agile fish, weave and intertwine within the gemstone. Mu Yungui didn't have time to recover his spiritual power at the moment, but it was obvious to the naked eye that this was the remaining heavenly essence liquid that Mu Yungui had thrown to Jiang Ruochen. The heart is almost finished. It still needs to condense a drop of the original heart's blood to enter. From the moment they entered the house, the two of them became extremely alert and showed no signs of frolicking. Thus, in Qin Valley, this young valley master, with the assistance of Mu Yungui, continued to do things against the sects while after the sect leader left the sect. Chapter 104, the courtyard gate was knocked. Time passed day by day, and before we knew it, it was New Year's Day at the foot of the mountain. The courtyard was much livelier now, with several young men and women busy at work. Beside the house, Zhai, dressed in a red and white dress, and Gu Jiyu, with candy in her mouth, held red paper in their hands, wanting to add some festive touches. After arriving in Zhangzhou, there was no news of the sword sect. It was unknown whether the girl had forgotten some of her past experiences. In any case, the girl, whose shackles had long been removed, had no intention of resisting and was quite obedient. However, his personality hasn't become much more cheerful. He's still like a machine, only he seems to have gained a little more attention than before, and he likes sweets. Jiyu, hand it to me. Gu Jiyu was wearing the large scarf given to her by Zhai, and she looked very cute. The girl handed over the red paper in her hand. Zhai ruffled the other's hair then, remembering Mu Yungui's instructions, smiled and said, "Thank you, Jiyu Tilda." Gu Jiyu. Qin Valley was started by Ning Xian, at least in the future, but this courtyard belongs to that young girl. At this moment, Jiang Ruochen was dressed in red, and her beautiful hair was tied up with a silver hairpin. Inside the room, a man and a woman were sitting, watching Jiang Shaimai pour tea for them. 2 months later, everyone in Qin Valley knew that the usually stern and aloof junior sister Jiang had changed. A white-haired girl appeared beside the young girl. No, it was a boy. This fact alone is enough to break the hearts of many disciples who have always admired the dazzling beauty of junior sister Jiang. The relationship between the seemingly appearing young man named Mu Yungui and this junior sister Jiang appears quite unusual. However, regardless of the circumstances, for most people, it was precisely because of Mu Yungui's existence that they were fortunate enough to witness scenes that were absolutely unimaginable in the past. For example, junior sister Jiang, who used to always have a blank expression, would show a rare smile in front of Mu Yungui. Most of the secular festivals in Qin Valley are celebrated, such as the Mid-Autumn Festival, when people compose poems, play the zither, and dance. During the Spring Festival, close-knit cultivators would gather together. Qinwan and Xiao Qingj, who had often been bystanders and were considered acquaintances by Mu Yungui, were also called up by Mu Yungui. However, Xiao Qingj and Qinwan were still somewhat shocked, not expecting to spend this spring festival with junior sister Jiang. Meanwhile, it seems that the young master of his own sect is working as a cook in the kitchen. Jiang Ruochen elegantly poured 2 cups of tea and gestured, "Senior brothers and sisters, please have some tea." Qinwan and Xiao Qingj, "Thank you, junior sister Jiang." And then nothing more was said. The two didn't have much in common with junior sister Jiang, so they hoped that the young valley master and junior brother Mu would return soon. Meanwhile, Ning Xianqi and Mu Yungui, who were the future leaders of these 10 major sects, were wearing only a single shirt in the kitchen, sweating profusely. The meat of the crane, which Mu Yungui had thrown down under the pretext of heat stroke, sizzled in the hot oil. The aroma filled the air instantly. "How is Brother Mu's recovery going?" Ning Xianqi asked, squinting, his hands still busy. Watching the heat in the pot with bated breath, Mu Yungui said, "It's almost fully recovered." At this moment, her thin body had become slightly rosier, and her originally sickly temperament had also changed a lot. However, her white hair had not returned to its original state, but Mu Yungui didn't care. "Before sending Gu Jiyu to the Wanli Sword Pavilion, I need to go to the Guandao Temple. I still have some questions about Shen Lingxiao. If anyone knows the answer, it must be the young abbot. And I also owe that Taoist temple a favor." Mu Yungui recalled the pale pink talisman and the strange old man selling talismans at the ferry crossing. The free gift, which he hadn't even paid attention to before, became one of the key factors in that life or death situation. Even without any doubts, he still had to make a special trip to visit it. Ning Xianqi pondered for a moment. A Taoist temple? Since Brother Mu knows about this Taoist temple, he must also know how difficult it is to visit it. Guandao Temple is an extremely special sect among the 10 major sects of Zhangzhou that is not ranked. It stands atop the highest mountain in the world, and there are only a few dozen people in the temple. Only the strongest people in the world have the opportunity to visit him. No one else has ever seen the abbot. I'm just afraid it would be very difficult to make a visit. As they were talking, the plate of meat had been transformed into a dish and placed on a plate. Mu Yungui, the cook, shook his head and explained after he had secretly eaten some food. That Taoist temple isn't what Brother Ning thinks. As long as the abbot is interested in someone, even a foundation establishment cultivator will be invited up there. As for why this stereotype exists, it's mainly because, in the past, it was always the strong who went there out of curiosity, leading later generations to believe that all the strong had to go, thus making it a must-visit spot for high-level cultivators. If very few people have seen the abbot, it's simply because he's a recluse. Although Mu Yungui spoke of it as if it were nothing out of the ordinary, to Ning Xianqi it was absolutely unofficial history, and the most unofficial kind at that. However, according to Mu Yungui, he can indeed go up, since this guy is indeed quite strange. He didn't believe that no strong person wouldn't be interested in him. He is knowledgeable, approachable, and easy to get along with. However, I'd like to learn more about him. Cough, cough, I feel like this description sounds a bit strange. Mu Yungui rolled her eyes at Ning Xianqi, who didn't believe her, her eyes filled with, "I'm too lazy to explain to you." The main reason was that he had been there in his previous life. However, Mu Yungui was not interested in the Taoist temple that explored the Tao of Heaven, so he did not stay for long. The courtyard was bustling with activity, filled with festive cheer, and inside the house, dozens of dishes sizzled and smelled delicious. Amidst everyone's praise, Ning Xianqi wiped away his sweat and said, "Zhi'er usually takes care of me, but I'm actually quite good at taking care of myself. If something happens one day and I lose all my cultivation and escape Qin Valley, I won't starve to death. Heh." Mu Yungui looked at Ning Xianqi, who was smugly pleased, and said, "You'd better be joking." Ning Xianqi smiled slightly. The others didn't take the remark to heart, treating it as a joke. Qinwan and Xiao Qingj were initially quite reserved, but Ning Xianqi and Mu Yungui were very good at livening up the atmosphere. Since the deafening roar, the children in the tea village have no longer been repeatedly warned not to stray too far from the village. Although the adults still had some worries, they were much less so overall. Firecrackers went off. In the small courtyard at the entrance of the village, the father and daughter had already cooked the meal. There were fewer valuables in the room than before. Chenmo gradually sold off the items he couldn't take with him to buy some travel expenses and other necessities. The father and daughter didn't celebrate the new year in a grand way, because they would be leaving this place soon, and Chenmo had no idea when they would return. There were only 2 people inside the room. Chen Qinger took 4 pairs of bowls and chopsticks from the table. Chenmo saw through the girl's thoughts at a glance and smiled. "Does Qinger think Brother Mu will come?" "I don't know, but it's Chinese New Year, and if Brother Mu and Sister Jiang can't make it home in time, then when they open the door and see the bowls and chopsticks already prepared, they might say that Qinger is very sensible tilde. I'm really looking forward to hearing Brother Mu tell me those weird and wonderful stories tilde." The father and daughter smiled at each other, neither of them expecting the 2 to arrive. The 2 sat down, picked up their chopsticks, and were about to start eating. There was a knock on the courtyard gate. Chapter 105 by Nyan, Mujin. Chen Qinger put down her chopsticks from inside the house and hurriedly ran over to open the door, thinking that the knocking sounded as soon as she finished speaking meant that Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen might really come to visit again. The door opened, and there were indeed 2 people in front of them. It wasn't them, but 2 girls, one tall and one short. A tall, slender young woman stood gracefully. She wore a purple dress, the hem of which swayed gently in the wind like a blooming violet. Although the Longyuan dynasty was no longer as cold as it had been a while ago, such clothing was clearly inappropriate for the current temperature. If we ignore the chill for the moment, the other party is definitely the most eye-catching one. That stunning face was like a finely sculpted work of art, her fair skin as smooth and delicate as jade. Beneath her arched willow leaf eyebrows, a pair of bright, star-like eyes were deep and captivating, just like the twinkling stars in the night sky. Her high, straight nose and slightly upturned lips created a perfectly timed smile that was captivating. Coupled with her graceful figure, the purple dress was made even more stunning, exuding a unique charm. Chen Qinger looked up, his gaze meeting the girl's eyes. In that instant, he seemed to be deeply drawn in by an invisible force, completely captivated by the vortex of those beautiful eyes. Then the girl in the purple dress spoke with a hint of curiosity. "What's the purpose of that red paper on the door?" Her lips parted slightly, a faint blush appearing on her delicate pink lips, adding to her charming and adorable appearance. Huh. Chen Qinger was at a loss for words when the other person spoke, but she remembered that she had felt the same way when she met Mu Yungui before. "Red paper." The girl in the purple dress looked on with curiosity, turning her head to look into the house. "Yes, after I came down from the mountain, there was a crackling sound here, so I came to see what was going on." Chen Qinger was somewhat at a loss regarding the other person's sense of boundaries and didn't know how to respond for a moment. The atmosphere became a little awkward. Just then, the shorter girl in white tugged at the girl in the purple dress. "Hey, sister, those are couplets. Didn't I tell you when I came down the mountain not to act so strange in front of people? Say, 'Excuse me,' before you speak." Chen Qinger curiously shifted her gaze slowly, finally fixing it on the white-clad girl who was trying to stop the girl in the purple dress. The girl in white was incredibly adorable. Her chubby little face, like a delicately sculpted jade, looked so plump that it seemed as if you could squeeze juice out of it if you pinched it gently. She was noticeably shorter than the girl in the purple dress beside her, looking like a petite porcelain doll. Then look at the wide, pure white robe she was wearing. It was ridiculously large, almost completely enveloping her small body. Only half of her delicate, white fingers were visible through her small hands. At this moment, the girl in white had a face full of resentment and whispered to the girl in the purple dress, "Sister." Even after being stopped, the girl in the purple dress still couldn't look away. "I can smell his scent." After he finished speaking, the girl in white was also taken aback, her eyes brightening slightly. "Hello, my name is Bai Nian, and this is my older sister, Mu Jin." After saying that, Bai Nian gave a soft smile. "One of the survival lessons I learned from my ancestors. You have to act in a way that makes people feel lovable." Chen Qinger was taken aback for a moment, then replied, "Greetings, Miss Bai and Miss Mu. My name is Chen Qinger. Sister Chen Qinger, could my sister and I mooch a New Year's Eve dinner? Of course, we won't eat for free." After saying that, Bai Nian took out a spirit stone from his pocket that he had picked up from the tiger demon's cave, which had long since turned into bones. Bai Nian held the spirit stone in her delicate little hands, and her big, round eyes were full of sincerity, as if she were expressing her earnestness and expectations. Seeing the situation outside the door, Chen Mo also came out and saw two guests outside. Chen Mo, who had seen spirit stones before, was stunned for a moment, not knowing who the other party was, but he also heard Bai Nian's request. If the other party wanted it, Chen Mo couldn't refuse, since they could very well be an immortal, so he had no choice but to invite them in. Yi, using the alias Hibiscus, followed closely behind Chen Mo into the house. Looking up, she immediately noticed the talisman hanging on the wall. She involuntarily stopped and stared at the talisman. May I take it off and look at it more closely?" Mu Jin asked softly, her voice revealing an irrepressible longing. His focused gaze caused the talisman, which had been hanging quietly, to react abnormally. The talisman began to tremble slightly. At first, it was just a slight tremor, but it quickly became more and more violent, as if it had encountered an extremely terrifying enemy. Standing to the side, Chen Mo was taken aback by what he saw. He knew the purpose of the talisman well, and seeing its violent reaction, how could he not be astonished? However, despite his inner fear and anxiety, Chen Mo tried his best to remain calm and dared not easily reveal his true emotions. Chen Mo pretended not to know. "What is that?" This, with a thought, a wisp of purple energy swept towards the talisman. At that time, the talisman was only made during the chi refining stage, so how could it withstand the attack of a golden core stage transformed demon? The demon instantly swept away the talisman. The golden light was completely shattered by the strange shock, turning into specks of light and dissipating. Without the blessing of spiritual energy, the talisman revealed a very eye-catching map. Seeing Yi act recklessly, Bai Nian quickly snatched the talisman away, her face full of apology. "I'm so sorry. My sister isn't very bright. We're not bad people. We know the person who drew this talisman." After saying that, Yi looked at Bai Nian, whose face was full of anger, and was stunned for a moment. This was the first time Bai Nian had ever been this angry. Usually it was lazy and sleepy. Its current state indicated that the other party was truly upset. "Sister, didn't I tell you this on the mountain? I repeatedly told you to listen to me down here, but you've forgotten everything in the blink of an eye." The once assertive Mu Jin was now being disciplined by Bai Nian, like a child who had made a mistake. Chen Mo, who was listening to Bai Nian's scolding, had his back soaked with sweat, but he couldn't escape. The reactions of the mountain, the humans, and the talismans gradually brought Chen Mo's conjecture closer to reality. The other party is not human. It might be a demon from the Meteor Dragon mountain range, and it can transform into human form. Although Chen Mo had not cultivated, he had heard his wife say that the transformed demons were extremely powerful. At this moment, a sense of crisis spread from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. They dared not take a step to escape, letting the transformed great demon berate the other great demon within its own territory. Chen Mo simply held Chen Kinger's hand, not daring to make any rash moves. The little girl, who had been scolding Yi for a while, turned her head and looked at Chen Mo and the other person, seemingly about to do something. If Chen Mo really wanted to stand in front of Chen Kinger when the other party made their move. The little girl looked apologetic, then actually knelt down and kowtowed. Yi looked at Bai Nian and wanted to imitate the movements. Chen Mo glanced at it, his mind already a complete mess, and hurriedly stopped the transformed demon. No, 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 immortal, there's no need for this. You must be the master's friends. I'm so sorry I didn't keep a close eye on this guy, and he ruined the gift the master gave you. Chapter 106, Red Robe. The year has indeed passed just like that. Mu Yungui also informed Ning Xianqi and the others that he was leaving. Although they all seemed somewhat shocked, Mu Yungui did not give up on his plan. The 4 guests had already left, and Gu Jiu had also returned to her room. At this moment, only Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen remained in the large room. The surroundings were completely silent, as if even the air itself had frozen. The two stood facing each other, and for a moment they fell into a brief silence. Mu Yungui tried to break the silence. We're leaving Qin Valley tomorrow. Will you miss it? But as long as Master is here, this is home. Wearing a bright red dress, Jiang Ruochen resembled a blooming red lotus, beautiful and charming. His eyes were lowered slightly, as if he dared not look directly at his master. The two had always shared a room, and their daily interactions were nothing out of the ordinary. They shouldn't have experienced such emotional fluctuations. However, at this moment, a strange tension surged into her heart like a tide, causing her heart to beat faster and her breathing to quicken involuntarily. The girl stood there, looking at the long red dress that Gjai had specially prepared for her. Seeing the atmosphere become somewhat awkward again, the girl, who was trying to find a topic to talk about, suddenly spoke up without any apparent reason. Master, how does Ruochen look today? He had been constantly busy. Mu Yungui had indeed never really taken a good look at his adorable little apprentice before. Mu Yungui gazed at the girl's charming face, a sudden stirring in his heart. For some reason, her appearance began to overlap with a figure deep within his memory. Mu Yungui's dazed appearance made Jiang Ruochen's heart tighten. The girl recalled long-forgotten memories that didn't belong to her. The other person noticed their unusual behavior. Jiang Ruochen recalled those memories. I'm sorry, Master, Ruochen shouldn't have worn red. Mu Yungui rubbed his face, becoming more awake. Why, so, Ruochen found out something. From the osmanthus cake incident, and the methods used after becoming possessed, some details were brought to Mu Yungui's mind. Therefore, Mu Yungui decided not to hide it any longer and simply asked about it. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ruochen's eyes darted away. I'm a little scared. I'm afraid that if I tell, Master will hate me. Mu Yungui shook his head. Ruochen is my only disciple. How could I dislike her? The girl recalled a memory that flashed through her mind. Her master wielding a green sword, his eyes never lowered in vigilance, filled with killing intent. That person might not be her, but thinking about it still makes me inexplicably sad. Looking at Ruochen's condition, Mu Yungui realized that it was indeed as he had guessed. It was strange that only he had been reborn, so he wasn't surprised that the witch who had died with him remembered something. However, Ruochen is no longer the demon Empress, and Mu Yungui does not want to reveal things that have not yet happened. To give an analogy, it's as if you're judging an innocent person who just looks like a criminal, and that person is the most important person in your life. The girl was confused. Master, so who is Ruochen? Without hesitation, Mu Yungui replied, Ruochen is Ruochen. But if Ruochen and I hadn't met in Suzhou, perhaps 100 years later, there would have been a demonic empress who fell into the demonic path, hated the world, and loved to wear red. In that maybe scenario, I, Mu Yungui, become a sword immortal, wielding my sword to slay demons and monsters, so I will also face that witch. If nothing unexpected happens, I will find a way to kill her. Just as Mu Yungui finished speaking, The entire world seemed to be suddenly enveloped by a mysterious and powerful force. The peaceful atmosphere was instantly shattered, and the surrounding air became heavy, as if something terrible was about to happen. Immediately afterwards, an indescribable will emerged out of nowhere. Although this will came so abruptly, it gave the impression that it had always existed in this world, as if it had been silently watching everything. At the same time, Mu Yungui, who was speaking, suddenly felt a chill creep up his neck. A thin line of blood had appeared on the front of his neck. At first, the line of blood was inconspicuous, but in the blink of an eye, it spread rapidly. It was only because Mu Yungui had not yet recovered his spiritual power that the attack was only maintained at a level that could kill him. However, even an attack from a chi refining stage cultivator would be fatal to Mu Yungui, as it would always be slightly stronger than his own. But how could the girl, whose eyes were filled with her master, remain unmoved? A pair of crimson eyes lit up, and the punishment that had appeared out of nowhere was shattered in an instant. The girl's eyes were filled with murderous intent, her gaze fixed on one spot, yet it seemed as if she were looking at everything. After a brief standoff, the presence dissipated. Mu Yungui propped himself up on the bed and coughed lightly. Maybe this shouldn't have happened, but it will get very angry if I bring it up. Jiang Ryuachin took a small step forward and stood in front of Mu Yungui. She gently raised her slender hand, and as softly as a spring breeze, slowly touched the wound on Mu Yungui's neck. So it really is because of me, the girl said with deep regret and self-reproach. As she finished speaking, a soft light emanated from her fingertips, instantly covering the wound on Mu Yungui's neck. In the blink of an eye, the bloodline had healed. No matter how much Master hates Ryuachin, please let Ryuachin protect you. Jiang Ryuachin stared at Mu Yungui with firm eyes, revealing an undeniable determination. I don't dislike Ryuachin at all. Mu Yungui smiled gently. Tell your master what happened that made you say that. Their eyes met, and they were already of one mind. Then Jiang Ryuachin understood and recounted the memories that had flooded her mind in the past. After speaking, the girl seemed to have used up all her strength, lowering her head as if awaiting judgment. After listening, Mu Yungui frowned slightly and fell into deep thought. His eyes flickered, as if he were rapidly sorting through various thoughts in his mind. Time passed second by second, and the surrounding air seemed to freeze. Finally, after much deliberation and some initial conjecture, Mu Yungui slowly raised his head. He slowly reached out and gently supported Jiang Ryuachin's shoulders, then carefully brought his forehead closer to hers. As they got closer, the atmosphere between them became increasingly ambiguous. Their breaths gradually intertwined, their warm breaths gently brushing against each other's cheeks. At this moment, their noses were almost touching, and such close contact made Jiang Ryuachin's heart beat faster involuntarily. Looking at the handsome face so close to her, the girl couldn't help but feel a little nervous and shy. Just then, those memories suddenly surged into Jiang Ryuachin's mind like a tidal wave. Those images began to flash back into her mind again and again. The scene was horrifying. His master's eyes had been cruelly gouged out, leaving only two shocking, blood-soaked holes. Looking at his hands and feet, they too had not escaped unscathed. They had been mercilessly severed, leaving the severed limbs a bloody mess, a truly gruesome sight. His body was tightly bound within an incredibly powerful and unbreakable formation, unable to escape. Nevertheless, the faint, almost imperceptible breathing indicated that he still had a sliver of hope. Witnessing this scene, the girl felt as if her heart had been pierced by 1,000 sharp blades, and the pain instantly spread throughout her body. That heart-wrenching pain surged into her heart like a raging tide. That divine heart truly aches. Chapter 107, Ears Are a Little Red. After an unknown amount of time, the girl finally slowly opened her eyes, but her body trembled slightly involuntarily. Mu Yungui released the girl's cheek and tapped her brow to bring her back to her senses. So you did see something again? Tell master. The girl didn't recount the scene from her memory. She hugged Mu Yungui tightly, biting her lip, trying to suppress her sorrow, but she was still very heartbroken. Mu Yungui patted the girl's back and comforted her. Those things don't exist, or maybe they will be like that in the future, but we met, so everything is different now. After Mu Yungui finished speaking, he repeated himself. They are different. The candles inside were still lit, swaying without wind. Afterwards, it unleashed several more punishments, but Mu Yungui was currently at a low level of cultivation, and those attacks were easily shattered by Jiang Ryuachin with a wave of her hand. Later, Mu Yungui also figured out its boundaries. It seemed that it could not probe thoughts, and Mu Yungui also conveyed the meaning through some abstract words. As for whether his own disciple had fully understood, Mu Yungui was not quite sure. Why would a master like Jiang Ruochen accept her as a disciple? In Suzhou, my master should have killed me. Maybe that would have ended everything. Mu Yungui frowned and corrected. The source of all this is not Ruochen, but Shen Qinghen. So that's why master wants to find a way to kill her. Mu Yungui nodded. There is a difference between madmen and humans. Those who cannot be corrected can only be killed, the sooner the better. But you, I don't think we can just abandon you like that. The girl remained silent as the two lay on the bed. Mu Yungui, that's how it is. It's not actually a very complicated matter, but it's hard for people to believe. I'm leaving Qin Valley tomorrow. Jiang Ruochen, could you tell me about your master and her story? Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui's body trembled slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. He gently turned over, pretending to be very calm, and cleared his throat, saying, Back then, Ruochen was a ruthless and murderous demonic monster. How could anything else have happened between us besides an extremely fierce battle? At this moment, the girl lying on the warm bed gently turned over, and then, like a cute little kitten, slowly moved her body, quietly approaching Mu Yungui. After arriving beside Mu Yungui, she peeked out from under the warm blankets with her delicate and charming face. A faint, almost imperceptible smile of smugness lingered on her face, for this clever and quick-witted girl had already seen all the memories of that past. When Mu Yungui felt the girl's curious and inquisitive gaze, he suddenly felt flustered and flustered. He tried to remain calm, but those clear, all-seeing eyes made him feel uneasy. The young girl gently raised her delicate hand to cover her cherry-like lips, smiling sweetly, as radiant and captivating as a flower blooming in spring. She slightly narrowed her eyes, a hint of playfulness and smugness in their sparkle, and softly said, As expected, it was around that time that Master was unable to handle Ruochen, wasn't it? Listening to Mu Yungui's reminiscing expression as he spoke of things that would never happen again, I realized that the person I was in the story and my master were completely different from who I am now. Thinking of this, Jiang Ruochen couldn't help but puff out her cheeks slightly, feeling a little annoyed, because she had been far too wicked back then. However, no matter how awful that self may be, it is still her. Thinking of this, Jiang Ruochen seemed to be driven by a mysterious force, and suddenly leaned slightly towards Mu Yungui. Her eyes, which were originally as clear as autumn water, suddenly lit up with an extremely bewitching red light. Yungui! With that soft yet alluring call, the girl slowly approached Mu Yungui. Immediately afterwards, that stunningly beautiful face gently leaned against Mu Yungui's broad and sturdy shoulders. Her silky smooth hair gently brushed against Mu Yungui's cheek, bringing a faint fragrance that was intoxicating. Just then, Jiang Ruochen whispered in Mu Yungui's ear in a voice that was almost like a dream, with a touch of allure. Would you like more osmanthus cake? I'll feed you. Although the words were spoken softly, they contained endless allure and provocation, as if they could penetrate one's soul and make one involuntarily intoxicated and unable to extricate oneself. Mu Yungui watched with interest as his disciple's demeanor suddenly changed. He reached out and gently pinched her rosy cheek, teasingly saying, Stop pretending. The girl's once innocent face now possessed a bewitching allure. The corners of her mouth were slightly upturned, forming a half smile, and she asked softly, What do you mean by that, master? I don't quite understand. Seeing this, Mu Yungui said irritably, Your ears are so red. I was already considering whether to reveal that matter, but now, my authority as a master is likely to be greatly diminished. As if her secret had been exposed, the girl's face instantly turned as red as a ripe apple, and she hurriedly buried her head deep into the warm quilt. Through the soft blankets, a faint, shy sound could be heard. Master, I'm sorry, please forget what Ruochen looked like just now. The voice was as faint as a mosquito's buzz, carrying a hint of embarrassment and unease. Mu Yungui yawned, turned his back to his little apprentice, and closed his eyes. Get some rest, we're leaving Qin Valley tomorrow. The girl replied. Fortunately, his master was not angry. With his back to the girl, Mu Yungui silently recited the mantra to calm his emotions. Fortunately, her earlier mental turmoil did not show on her face. Mu Yungui silently complained in his heart. Saying these things with that face is just too unfair. Upon closer inspection, his ears were slightly red. Chapter 108, Traveling Far Away. Time flies, and a month has passed in the blink of an eye. The harsh winter gradually subsided across the central continent, and the snow began to melt, but the cold winds continued to rage, as if unwilling to give up and remaining stubborn. However, such climate change did not have much impact on cultivators, who could freely mobilize their spiritual power to resist the cold. As for the matter of junior sister, Jiang leaving Qin Valley, it was not until several days after her beautiful figure disappeared that everyone gradually became aware of it. This was especially true for the Qin, a type of Chinese stringed instrument, disciples who hadn't yet experienced one-on-one duels. This junior sister Jiang was already an important figure, almost like a teacher. Those battles where there seemed to be no flaws among those of the same cultivation level were particularly memorable to everyone. Therefore, when they learned that she was leaving Qin Valley, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of reluctance. Rumors circulated that the junior sister had been tricked away by a white-haired boy who appeared out of nowhere, causing everyone to feel a little sorry for her, and perhaps secretly envious of the white-haired boy. Fortunately, after being repeatedly asked about their whereabouts, Ning Xianqi finally revealed that the two would return to Qin Valley. The disciples of Qin Valley who had benefited from the event were happy again, and a small sense of anticipation was added to this otherwise mundane sect. In a ferry market somewhere in central continent, the leisurely young girl had no idea that so many people in Qin Valley were paying attention to her. The Xianjia market was bustling with activity, and young men and women strolled along the street. Although the two possessed extraordinary qualities, and Mu Yunggui's white hair was particularly striking, no divine sense lingered on them for long. Mu Yungui couldn't help but sigh. There's some truth to the fact that they consider our eastern continent to be a remote and barbaric place. You see, the cultivators who ascend the mountains in the central continent are better able to control their desires. Order plays a much stronger role here than in the eastern continent. The influence of the academy in the eastern continent is vastly different from that here. The young girl beside her looked around and said softly, "Although it seems much safer now, there are still so many cultivators. We can't let our guard down easily. Especially since Master hasn't recovered his cultivation yet, please don't leave Ryuachen's side." Although this was a trip with a clear purpose, Mu Yungui did not seem to be in a hurry to reach his destination. At this moment their pace was much slower than before. They walked and stopped frequently along the way. Rather than describing this as a hurried journey, it's more like a leisurely trip. After a period of recuperation, Mu Yunggui's health has basically recovered. However, although his injuries had healed, he was still unable to gather spiritual energy into his body, and thus embark on the path to restore his original realm. Logically speaking, the sooner the better, but Mu Yungui didn't want to reason with him at this moment. My cultivation level and physical strength have not yet been restored, but I feel much more relaxed. Mu Yungui walked down the street with his arms crossed and his head resting on them. People with stunning looks often attract a lot of unexpected troubles and problems. At this moment, the girl stood beside her master, her stunningly beautiful face veiled by a thin veil. But even so, the veil could not completely conceal the extraordinary divinity emanating from her. The young girl parted her lips slightly and said softly, "If you feel that the current state is sufficient, then there is no need to continue this arduous cultivation. From now on, let your disciple Ryuachen protect you." Upon hearing this, Mu Yungui turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on his young apprentice beside him, whose extraordinary beauty could not be concealed even though she was wearing a veil. He looked at the girl, whose crimson eyes truly held a hint of seriousness. "If I become lazy and uneducated from now on, will Ryuachen still support me?" Then Ryuachen might become one of the strongest people, and might have to shoulder the responsibility of supporting all living beings and taking care of me. Mu Yungui clutched his heart, deeply moved. "I can't even imagine how happy I would be to spend decades like this." Upon hearing this, Jiang Ryuachen shook her head without hesitation and said firmly, "No, your disciple will absolutely not allow such a thing to happen. Ryuachen will do everything in her power, even at any cost, to ensure that Master lives forever and enjoys the world's splendor." She clenched her fists tightly, her eyes revealing unwavering determination and resolve. "That sounds a bit odd." Mu Yungui chuckled upon hearing this, glancing at his somewhat yandere-like little disciple. "I'm just taking a break temporarily after all. I'm your Master Tilda. And Master doesn't think there's anything wrong with being a mortal." We walked around, stopping frequently, but didn't linger in front of any particular shop. Various talismans and magical artifacts were on display, far more numerous than those at the ferry crossing. During the journey, Mu Yungui counted the spirit stones in his hand. The 500,000 spirit stones he borrowed from Shen Ling Xiao were originally intended for Jiang Ryuachen's cultivation resources. but he hadn't spent a single penny of them. On the contrary, the girl had earned more than 10,000 spirit stones in Chin Valley. Such wealth is considered extremely rich, even for those at the nascent soul or divine transformation stage. Originally, Mu Yungui thought it wouldn't matter if he spent tens of thousands of spirit stones here, and if he could find any suitable items, he would go to the Taoist temple to thank the old Taoist. Full of anticipation, they searched everywhere for something that would catch their eye. However, after browsing through stall after stall, they still couldn't find anything. Instead, I was drawn to a huge crystal, placed in a corner of a seemingly inconspicuous little shop. This crystal is several meters long and is crystal clear throughout. Seeing this, the shop owner quickly came forward and enthusiastically introduced the products. You two have excellent eyesight. This is an extremely rare Luoshui stone, not only crystal clear but also incredibly hard. It can easily withstand even the powerful attacks of a golden core stage expert. Whether forged into a formidable weapon or exquisitely crafted into a magnificent ornament, it would be an excellent choice. The shop hadn't been open for a long time, and the owner could tell the two were extraordinary, so he enthusiastically began to introduce them. To be honest, it took me a lot of effort to finally get my hands on a Luoshui stone of this size and of such high quality. After hearing the shop owner's praise, Mu Yungui rolled his eyes and said, "Even so, you didn't mention a word about the defects of this Luoshui stone, which is difficult to cut and process." A hint of embarrassment flashed across the shop owner's face, but he quickly regained his composure and explained with an awkward smile. "Well, there are indeed such problems, but as the saying goes, a flaw doesn't detract from a virtue. It's precisely because of these minor shortcomings that the price is so affordable. Otherwise, given its rarity and superior performance, how could it possibly be so cheap?" Looking at the crystal, Mu Yungui thought of Chen Mo and Chen Qinger. It was a pity that he hadn't been able to protect their most prized works, the Cloud Ink sword box and the mask. Mu Yungui said thoughtfully, "That's true. How about we add another one?" Mu Yungui looked around the shop, then noticed an item displayed in an inconspicuous spot and picked it up. "Those are worthless items, but it's all right if you take a few more, sir." Mu Yungui shook his head, indicating that it was not necessary. The girl handed over several thousand spirit stones, then took the crystal from the shop owner inside the house, whose face was beaming with joy, and put it into her spatial ring. Mu Yungui approached the girl, removed the small glass sword that had been stuck in her hair, and put the hairpin that she had just chosen, which had a slight spiritual aura on it. The shop owner smiled broadly, roughly counted the spirit stones in his hand, and then generously praised them, saying a few words to Mu Yungui and Jiang Ruochen as they left. "The two of you are so loving. It's truly the envy of everyone." Mu Yungui did not offer any further explanation. The girl, who had initially felt a pang of regret for the thousands of spirit stones, suddenly brightened up, fiddled with the hairpin in her hair, and smiled broadly. Chapter 109, Climbing the Mountain. Who researched this thing? Mu Yungui looked at the small, transparent sword that the girl had taken from her hand, a celestial sword that he himself couldn't even lift at the moment, so it can change size at will. Jiang Ruochen fiddled with the obsession in her palm, which resembled an ornament, and replied, "I don't know. Because the obsession sword energy was too strong, I used magic to suppress it, and I accidentally discovered that the obsession could shrink. Besides, it's too conspicuous, so I'll keep it out of my hair for now." Mu Yungui remarked, "Using a celestial sword as a hairpin. You're probably the first person to do that. This, I'll give it to Ruochen as her sword." The girl hurriedly waved her hand. "No, no, no, Master already gave the silver hairpin to Ruochen's hair. Compared to that hairpin worth a few dozen spirit stones is the immortal sword." Mu Yungui waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to say more. "The immortal slaying sword from ancient times. Although you are not a sword cultivator, the techniques and power of light used by your divine heart are in line with your obsession, so it is still suitable." Jiang Ruochen looked at the obsession in her palm, and not wanting to refuse, she put the obsession back into her hair. Mu Yungui gazed intently into the distance. "How is it?" This is probably the highest mountain Ruochen has ever seen. The two had traveled a long and arduous journey. Although they were still several days away from Guandao Temple, they could already see the striking mountain if they looked up. The mountain peak disappeared into the clouds, and the appearance of the Taoist temple could not be seen. Looking down at the foot of the mountain, a few small towns are scattered here and there. The two continued their journey, and several days later they entered a small town near the foot of the mountain. The two, who had just arrived at the foot of the mountain, entered a small town. There were many cultivators there, but the residents were all ordinary people. The other cultivators weren't very interested in the arrival of the two, but rather in the person who had no cultivation at all. The man, dressed in a brown cloth robe, approached the two. "Excuse me, are you two immortals also here to seek the immortals on the mountain? Do you need temporary lodging?" Mu Yungui was slightly surprised by the newcomer, because in the eastern continent, if there were no rampant demons, people in the mortal world would not have a good impression of cultivators, and would even be afraid of them. After all, if the other party is even slightly unhappy, a wave of the hand can make them disappear into thin air. The residents here are not afraid of the cultivators. On the contrary, they do business with them. "How much is a night if I stay at the hotel?" It was getting late, so Mu Yungui didn't refuse. The shopkeeper replied, "If it's 2 rooms, it'll cost 2 taels of silver per night." Mu Yungui originally thought that the transaction would be conducted using spirit stones, but he didn't expect it to be calculated at mortal prices. Mu Yungui exchanged a glance with Jiang Ruochen, who was in charge of the treasury. Then, the girl took out a piece of silver from her spatial ring and quickly handed it over. "You only have 1 room left, right?" Before the shopkeeper could react, he explained, "No, we still have rooms available. You only have 1 room, here's a piece of silver for you." Right. Is that right? 1 silver coin for 1 room, that's true, but the shopkeeper, who actually had 2 empty rooms, looked at the girl in front of him. The look in her extremely peculiar eyes left no room for doubt. As a mortal shopkeeper who had dealt with all sorts of cultivators for a long time, his worldly wise mind was already as clear as a mirror. The shopkeeper only needed to glance at them briefly to instantly understand the deeper meaning in their words. He quickly pulled a bronze key from his pocket and handed it to the two of them. Yes, there's only 1 room left. This is the key you wanted. I still have a lot of chores to take care of at the shop, so I really can't take up your precious time. I'll take my leave now." Having said that, he swiftly and decisively completed the task. Mu Yungui watched the 2 people make a quick deal and hesitated to speak. The girl wasn't guilty at all. She simply said righteously, "Master hasn't recovered his strength yet, so he should stay with Ruochen." Nothing happened that night. The next day, the 2 set off down the mountain after daybreak. At the foot of the mountain, a group of cultivators with varying auras were gathered. The young girl glanced at them briefly and said, "Master, those people's cultivation levels are all different, ranging from foundation establishment to nascent soul. There are even cultivators who have surpassed the nascent soul stage. I don't understand. We're not bad people, there's no need to report like this." Mu Yungui exchanged glances with the others, and both sides tacitly remained silent, as if it were commonplace. Mu Yungui sighed, "The void refinement stage. That old man is only at the peak of the void refinement stage. It's surprising that one of the few void refinement stage cultivators in the world has come here to join in the fun. The Guandao Temple is probably more famous than I remember. It might be more troublesome than I imagined." The 2 walked slowly forward side by side, gradually approaching the scattered crowd ahead. They stopped and looked up at the mountain steps that resembled a giant python coiling upwards. Numerous cultivators were seen struggling to ascend the spiral mountain steps. Looking up from the foot of the mountain, one can see that none of the cultivators used any spiritual power to aid their ascent. Instead, they moved steadily upwards, 1 step at a time. However, the situation is quite different when the view is shifted to a height thousands of feet above the ground. The monks there all had solemn expressions, and each step they took seemed extremely difficult, as if they were carrying a 1,000-pound burden. Some even had to grit their teeth and use all their strength to barely lift their feet before carefully placing them down again. Some even had to back away step by step, panting and pausing for a moment to recover some energy. In his previous life, Mu Yungui had once used his sword to crash down from mid-air towards the temple, but he had never come to the foot of this mountain to see how to get up from below. A cultivator in a blue robe glanced at Mu Yungui's puzzled expression and mocked. "I thought 2 extraordinary young men had come, but they turned out to be just ordinary people. With that kind of build, they think they can meet the Taoist priest on the mountain." Hearing what the man said, Jiang Ruochen raised an eyebrow, feeling somewhat displeased, but she didn't act impulsively. Seeing this, Mu Yungui took the girl's hand. The cultivator in the blue robe became even angrier upon seeing the 2 inexplicably holding hands. "You rascal! The girl beside me has a refined air about her. She must be exceptionally talented and extraordinary." Mu Yungui, who was initially speechless, suddenly smiled broadly and gave the man a thumbs up. "If you can talk, then talk more." The person was caught off guard by Mu Yungwee's zero-frame face change and was somewhat at a loss. Mu Yungwee stopped in front of the mountain steps, ignoring the man's tone, and instead asked, "Could this fellow Taoist tell me what secrets lie behind that path leading up the mountain?" HMPH tilde what harm would it do to tell you? The cultivator pointed to the starting point a few steps in front of him. Aren't all the people who come here hoping to go up the mountain to see the abbot who can see the secrets of heaven and knows everything? There are countless cultivators in the world. Apart from those few who are unstoppable and can fly through the air to visit us, those of us at a lower level can only do so by going up these mountain steps. The mountain steps were also set up with an array by the people in the Taoist temple. Instead of being restricted by realm, there was a suppression of divine sense. With each step, the divine sense would become heavier. That's why you see those climbers on the mountainside looking so disheveled. Mu Yungwee looked up and estimated the towering mountain. This must be tens of thousands of meters high, right? Is it even possible to climb it? The cultivator in the green robe said, "It is said that several cultivators with great ambitions once climbed up the mountain step by step, but no one knows where they went after they reached the top." Mu Yungwee continued, "So only a handful of people have gone up there in the last few hundred or even 1,000 years, and you keep trying." The man glared at Mu Yungwee and said irritably, "What? You look down on me?" Mu Yungwee waved his hand, his eyes full of sincerity. The cultivator in the blue robe looked forlorn and sighed softly. "I once thought I must go up, but I know my own strength, so now I'm just here to train my divine sense." Mu Yungwee looked at the people on the mountainside who weren't in a hurry to go up, and suddenly realized what was going on. Mu Yungwee clasped his hands in a fist salute to the green-robed cultivator before him, who, despite his harsh tone, was actually quite kind-hearted. "Thank you for your answer, fellow Taoist." Seeing Mu Yungwee's sincerity, the man's tone softened somewhat, but his words remained sharp and sarcastic. "You're someone without any cultivation. How strong can your spiritual sense be? Don't step on it and turn into an idiot, hee. Still being stubborn, just as the man finished speaking and was about to continue, he saw Mu Yungwee leading Jiang Ryuachin leisurely up the mountain steps, the two still talking about something. The sight of the two chatting and laughing made the people on the mountain steps pause in surprise. Chapter 110, Descending the Mountain. 10 steps, 100 steps, 1,000 steps. After confirming the mystery of the mountain steps, Mu Yungwee led Jiang Ryuachin up them. Although Mu Yungwee's cultivation has not yet recovered, the test at this time is not of the physical body, but something akin to faith. 500 meters, 1,000 meters. Two people walked side by side, slowly ascending the mountain steps. They chatted and laughed along the way, seemingly unaffected by their surroundings. At the foot of the mountain, the green-robed cultivator and the others looked up at this scene, all of them dumbfounded. It should be noted that this mountain is protected by a powerful array that makes it extremely difficult for ordinary people to take even one step up. Yet these two people seem to be walking on flat ground with ease, and their pace shows no signs of slowing down at all. As the two passed by the cultivators who were also struggling to climb the mountain steps, many people's minds were shaken, and their originally firm Tao hearts began to show signs of instability. "Ryuachin, do you feel unwell?" After walking about 2,000 meters, Mu Yungwee asked with concern. "My steps feel a little heavy, but not physically, it's more mentally." The girl reflected on her feelings since climbing the mountain. "But master, please don't worry about Ryuachin. I definitely won't hold you back." Mu Yungwee did not continue, but paused briefly. "This towering mountain is about 20,000 meters high. How high do you think Ryuachin can go?" The girl rested her chin on her index finger, pondering the pattern she had followed up. With this increasing pressure and speed, it should reach around 19,000 meters per second. After receiving the girl's answer, Mu Yungwee immediately said, "Is that so? Then let's not climb this mountain." The girl frowned slightly. "Why? Ryuachin won't hold you back anymore." Mu Yungwee shook his head. "I don't think Ryuachin will hold us back. On the contrary, I think Ryuachin can reach the top, but it will definitely be too tiring. We can't let Ryuachin suffer unnecessary injustice here." The girl asked, puzzled, "But aren't we supposed to go up to the mountaintop?" "Master, please don't make this decision because of Ryuachin." Mu Yungwee smiled, took the girl's hand, and walked back, explaining, "No, it's just that I actually thought of several other ways to climb the mountain. I just wanted to experience climbing from the bottom to the top. But since there are better ways, there's no need to go up. And, cough, cough, I've been thinking and I think I'm a little tired." At the foot of the mountain steps, The onlookers, unaware of the conversation between the two, were astonished to see them. Their expressions still composed, actually turn around and walk back. The two then walked back the way they came. Everyone was at a loss for words at this baffling maneuver. Another incense stick's time passed, and the two descended the mountain steps, returning to their starting point. At this moment, Mu Yungui was panting slightly, wiping the fine sweat from his forehead, and muttered, "It's a good thing I didn't choose to walk up. The faint pressure wasn't a big deal, but considering the altitude, it's probably over 30,000 meters." The cultivator in the green robe, who was standing nearby, overheard what Mu Yungui said and couldn't help but ask. "The reason you came down was because you felt the road was too long, not because your divine sense was suppressed." Mu Yungui rolled her eyes at him. "Otherwise what? I'm just a mere mortal. How can my speed compare to yours?" Mu Yungui's answer was both unexpected and reasonable to the cultivator in the green robe. The monk in the green robe stroked his chin, took a breath, and wanted to say something, but he didn't know where to begin. He then looked at the slender girl beside him whose face was unknown and whose face was covered by a thin veil. "This girl might have been able to go up, so why did you lead her down? Do you know what this opportunity means?" Before Mu Yungui could answer, Jiang Ruochen interrupted without hesitation. "I do." The girl looked at the startled cultivators in front of her, who were meddling in everything, and she didn't quite like them. The crowd was utterly bewildered by the actions of the two. The cultivators who come here are all here for the answers that have troubled them all their lives. They are willing to spend years, or even decades, climbing this mountain in order to find the answers they want. The two people in front of them have a very high chance of getting that opportunity, but they seem to care little. After resting for a while, Mu Yungui looked up at the mountaintop again, his eyes seemingly lost in thought. The cultivator in green robes thought to himself, wondering what kind of sorcery the young man before him possessed. He had no cultivation whatsoever, yet he had managed to abduct such a talented young woman as his Taoist companion. She is indeed good-looking. Judging from his previous behavior, he seemed to care a lot about the girl. After resting for a while, Mu Yungui looked up at the sky, trying to see the mountain peak breaking through the clouds. "Fellow Taoist, does the technique of flying up the mountain only work on people?" The cultivator in the blue robe was puzzled, but still answered him. "To be precise, it applies to all cultivators below the Mahayana stage." Mu Yungui glanced at his disciple, Ruochen. "If you throw your entire obsession into the air, can you get it up there? A strong will is as thin as a cicada's wing. If there are no obstacles, it should work. Then throw your obsession up there." The girl exhaled, then her eyes lit up instantly. Her hands swirled with magic, and a golden chain linked to the hilt of the sword of obsession. She then flung the chain out, and the glass flying sword exploded with a loud bang, instantly tearing through space and flying into the air before disappearing into the clouds, its whereabouts unknown. "That sword just thrown up there like that?" The cultivator in the blue robe was dumbfounded. Ignoring the gazes of the others, Mu Yungui turned to the cultivator in blue robes and asked, "Fellow Taoist, how long have you been here?" 3 years, 4 months, and 5 days. "May I ask what you are seeking?" Then what you're doing does seem a bit presumptuous. But it's not anything dirty. Actually, all I'm seeking is some information about someone who has already been reincarnated. I have no other requests than to have the chance to see that person again." As they spoke, the cultivator in the blue robe gently stroked the object hanging at his waist, then slowly took it in his hand. It was a jade pendant cleverly made of 2 pieces of jade joined together. At this moment, a deep look of reminiscence appeared on the face of the cultivator in the blue robe. "Doesn't it seem foolish to waste so much of your precious time and energy on someone who has already been reincarnated and whose whereabouts are unknown?" The cultivator in the green robe smiled self-deprecatingly, then shook his head gently, as if trying to shake off the lingering sorrow in his heart. Seeing this, Mu Yungui, who was standing to the side, was about to say something to comfort the other party, but was stopped by the green-robed cultivator raising his hand. The monk in the blue robe waved his hand, his tone slightly relieved, and said, "There's no need to bother comforting me. Perhaps things aren't as bad as you think, and maybe I'm not as pitiful as you believe." After speaking, he turned his gaze back to the warm jade pendant in his hand, his eyes flashing with a complex and subtle light, making it difficult to fathom what he was thinking deep in his heart at that moment. Mu Yungui looked at the seemingly weathered cultivator in the blue robe before him and said, "Fellow Taoist, there are too many nuances in your words. Perhaps even a whole jar of wine wouldn't be enough to express them all." The monk in the green robe chuckled softly. Chapter 111, I'm a Pure Lover. At that very moment, some unusual noises suddenly broke out on the mountaintop, which had returned to tranquility. Everyone present looked up, their eyes fixed on that spot. A faint point of light began to flicker on the mountaintop. At first, it was as small as the most distant star in the night sky, but then it grew larger and larger at an astonishing speed, like a falling meteor, leaving a magnificent and dazzling arc in its wake. Everyone who witnessed this scene was so astonished that they couldn't close their mouths. They secretly wondered if a Taoist priest was preparing to go down the mountain. However, amidst the gasps of astonishment, only Mu Yungui remained remarkably calm and composed. Previously, the Guandao Temple had shown interest in me and sent people to investigate the matter of my obsession. Now that I have even offered them the immortal sword, they will definitely take action. As expected, after a moment of smugness, Mu Yungui turned to the cultivator in blue robes beside him without changing his expression and spoke calmly. "Fellow Taoist, may I ask your name and the name of the person you're looking for?" While I can't guarantee that this matter will definitely be successful, if I have the opportunity to speak with that young abbot, perhaps I can ask this question for you." Upon hearing Mu Yungui's words, the cultivator in the green robe froze on the spot, a deep look of confusion in his eyes. After a long while, the monk in the blue robe finally came to his senses, as if waking from a dream. "Why did you help me?" Mu Yun straightened up and said righteously, "I am a person of pure love." Actually, nothing much happened. The person in front of him simply tossed a sword up and said some nonsensical things. But for some reason, the cultivator in the green robe found himself somewhat trusting of the person in front of him, even though he doesn't have any cultivation level.